Well, and we're live. Hello, everybody. And it's Sunday at 9 p.m. GMT. Thanks very much for joining us, wherever you are out there. And welcome to the Dune Book Club. I hope you are enjoying this so far. As I said, we're just sort of getting going. We've covered our first two chapters already. We're about to have a look at chapter 3. And as I said, we're annotating the heck out of this thing. Oh, excuse me. And that's a bit better. Feeling a bit larger there. And just going through the book bit by bit and really having a look at it. And I suppose we're going to look at this book in incredible detail. I'm somebody who's taken this book apart several times, but I've always had a particular focus on it, looking at specific themes, this kind of thing. And the last time I read Dune was just prior to the film coming out, really. And I just read it for pleasure. Just wasn't making any notes or anything like that, or trying to figure out stuff, just to enjoy it and refresh my memory of the story. So it's really nice to come back to it in this way and have a look at it in real detail. And as I said, we're ready to start off with chapter 3. If anybody's out there, by the way, say hello. And as usual, if we have any questions or comments or any little ideas that run along with this stuff, let us know. So to begin at the beginning with chapter 3, as I like to say, we start off with another one of these epigraphs. Every chapter begins with them, so I'll call this one epigraph 3, if you like. And I'll just read it, just to get off the bat. I suppose it's always best to read these things. Thus spoke St. Alia of the Knife. The Reverend Mother must combine the seductive wiles of a courtesan with the untouchable majesty of a virgin goddess, holding these attributes in tension so long as the powers of her youth endure. For when youth and beauty have gone, she will find that the place between, once occupied by tension, has become a wellspring of cunning and resourcefulness. And this is from Muad'Dib Family Commentaries by the Princess Irulan. So we start off with another new character being mentioned, and Alia is not actually, this is Alia, of course, and she's just mentioned briefly in this epigraph. And the suggestion is, as I suppose, from the name of the book by Princess Irulan, who's the author of all of these epigraphs, that it's from Family Commentaries. So as much as the epigraph in particular is about the Bene Gesserit, but as I said, we get for the first time the mention of Alia, and it's suggestive that whoever this Alia is a relative of Muad'Dib. And so this comment, this epigraph, is actually meant to be a comment by Alia. Thus spoke Alia of the Knife, regarding the Bene Gesserit's qualities, and specifically those of a Reverend Mother. There's Babs saying, evening, Doc. Evening, Babs. Thanks for joining us. We're just getting going. Hope you're keeping well. And hi to everybody else out there. So yeah, off we go. And as I said, it's Alia is a great character, and unfortunately, we're not going to meet her for quite some time. But just having a wee look at that. There's a few wee points of interest, I suppose. The Reverend Mothers, and it's a combination. They should combine these things. Seductive wiles of a courtesan, the untouchable majesty of a virgin goddess. And I think it was quite interesting, actually. I was having a wee look at the idea of the mother goddess in Dune. And it's, if you kind of go to the back of the book, to the terminology of the Imperium, not that it's in this case, but I just thought it was interesting. We get this great mother kind of thing. And it just, let me see if I can find it for you, folks. Great Mother is the horned goddess, the feminine principle of space, commonly mother space, and then the feminine face of the male, female, neuter trinity, accepted as supreme being by many religions within the Imperium. We'll have a wee chat about that in a wee bit, by the way, folks. And I just thought it was a wee bit interesting, and I've actually made a wee doodle here. So it's about holding these attributes in tension, and this is going to be a sort of running motif through this chapter. In terms of words that we point out, that Frank Herbert's always trying to sort of imprint certain ideas on you. And we've kind of had our establishing chapter, which we went into pretty big detail. And then our previous chapter, we've kind of met the villains, if you like. Not that we, Baron Harkonnen, Piter, and and Fade Routha. So the action in this now shifts back to Caladan. I'll come to that in a wee second, folks. I'm jumping ahead of myself. So they find that the places in between, which were once occupied by tension, has become a wellspring of cunning and resourcefulness. And the wee thing that I've just pointed out is that just remember that the author of this epigraph is Irulan, who's a Bene Gesserit, of course. So before we get on with that, I just thought that we are back on Caladan, and we'd had a little bit of a chat just about the different planets and stars and their mythological associations, and we really hadn't discussed Caladan. So I'll quickly jump in here and just give you a few wee notes on it. There's Chaya saying shalom. Hello, Chaya. Thanks for joining us. I hope you're keeping well. We're just getting going. So just a wee, I've called it a bit of planet lore here. So Caladan, the home of House Atreides within Dune, is meant to be the third planet of Delta Pavonis. So if we know a bit about our constellations and so on, Pavo is the Latin for peacock. And this is the constellation Pavo. And the peacock in particular is a very interesting thing. In association with Greek and Roman mythology, but is particularly associated with the goddess Hera. And interestingly enough, I suppose, I don't know if you know this, well, no, you wouldn't know this at all, would you? The day I got married in a place called Muad'Dib Temple, which is on the edge of a cliff. And I arrived a little bit early with my father, and we went to a very unusual little cafe just around up a wee bit in the countryside. And I had a cup of coffee with my father because we were about half an hour early, surrounded by peacocks and peahens on my wedding day. And being a class assistant, and all, I said, "Oh, we were quite surprised to find all these." And they were all these peacocks. To be honest, there was about 10 of them. And I always said, "Oh, if I was a person that was superstitious or anything like that, that would be a very good omen for my wedding, if you like." Ended up having a perfect day on Midsummer's Day of my wedding. It was lovely. The peacock, in this sense, it's a circumpolar star, Pavo, in the southern hemisphere. So I've never seen the southern stars myself, except on maps and videos, etc. But very sad to say, I've never seen them with my own eyes. So in this case, what is the peacock? And has it got anything to do with Dune? Probably not in this case, I would think. But the peacock, depending on which version of the myth attached to the star, I suppose, the constellation, the peacock is either Argus or Argos, depending on how you pronounce it or spell it. And he would be the builder of the ship, the Argo, which is obviously the ship of the Argonauts, Jason and the Argonauts. And so I think in mythology is meant to be the world's first iron ship. The other version of this story is more associated with Hera, and it's to do with Io and Zeus, etc. And the other version is that the peacock is representative of Argus Panoptes, which means Argus all-seeing, who was, and in Greek mythology, Argus Panoptes would be a 100-eyed giant that Hera kind of used to guard Io. And it was basically eventually put to sleep and killed by Hermes, the messenger of the gods. So just in terms of that planetary mythological association, I don't think this is one that's relevant, to be honest. It may be, but I can't see it. But if we've been kind of doing this with each of the home worlds of the various people in Dune, etc. So I just thought I'd give you a wee bit of blurb on the star there, and I think some of the others have been quite relevant to kind of the underlying myths, etc. There's a few wee things. We're going to get to the Bene Gesserit planet in this episode, and I think you'll find it particularly interesting. So let me just get my copy of the book open, see where we're at. So let's see. So we have obviously the setting. We've got the Reverend Mother and Jessica, and they're talking. We've got Castle Caladan, and again we're told that this is at sunset, and it's on the same day that Paul has received his Gom Jabbar test. So we have Jessica and Mohiam in the morning room. I always thought that was kind of interesting. It's a morning room, and maybe a little bit of a play on words there. That it's also mourning as in grieving, if you like. And I think that the double meaning on there is quite good. I think it makes sense that, in a sense, that Jessica's mourning for the loss of Paul's innocence, this kind of thing, if we wanted to take that interpretation of it. So at this point, we get this question from the Reverend Mother, and she asks Jessica, "What were you thinking?" And we also, very quickly, folks, so we're also told that Paul's next door. And let me see, just to have a wee look. Well, as I said, "Well, Jessica, what have you to say for yourself?" asked the Reverend Mother. And we get these wee bits of again, this repetition that Herbert likes to use. And we get this: Jessica saw and yet did not see. She heard and yet did not hear. And so the question is supposed to be lost to her, I think. But the point I kind of wanted to make here, I suppose, is that the focus is really on Jessica in this chapter at this point. And we get this sense, just to have a wee read here, that what we've just witnessed with Gaius, Helen, Mohiam, and Paul, the box, and the Gom Jabbar, and everything, it should make us really question what sort of mother is Jessica to allow this to happen. And to the point where presenting effectively a potential assassin to her son, putting her son in a position where he may be murdered. And of course, that's how we can look at it, but it obviously has different meanings and different interpretations within the Dune universe. It's an important test for Paul. But I think what Herbert does here is quite important. And by focusing on Jessica and the fact that she's gone through a Gom Jabbar test herself when she was young and inexperienced. And this is, we kind of presented this, her mind is drifting back to remember the time that she did this. And this is kind of why she's blanked out the question. Though I'd argue most Bene Gesserit aren't capable of blanking out much, to be honest. So the focus is on here. And she talks about, at the time, we get a sense of when this was for her. Her body was tortured by the winds of puberty. And the use of these words, by the way, here we get tortured. And I think there's a number of things here, but I've just made a wee note, reminds us of Piter's sadism. So if you think about it, we've just come from the previous chapter where there's lots of suggestions about Piter wanting Jessica, wanting her in. And I suppose that the suggestion is that Piter's character is homosexual, the same as the Baron's in that chapter. But he wants Jessica, obviously not for sexual reasons. Why? And it's because he's a sadist and he wants to torture her. And I think somebody mentioned there previously, possibly likes the ideas of getting his hands on a Bene Gesserit again to experiment and break their training, this kind of thing. But we get a real sense that Piter is an absolute sadistic nut, to be honest with you. I always really enjoy Piter in the book. I have to say, I'm still absolutely gutted that the character was so underused and by a reasonably good actor too. Just didn't see enough of him in the film. So the focus really does shift here a wee bit. And I think it's just, it's designed that we're going to get a bit of sympathy back for Jessica and hopefully a bit of understanding. So next we get the Reverend Mother. And the Reverend Mother, Gaius Mohiam, what a great character again. And we get her full sort of title here. Again, as we've met her, very little was sort of revealed as the way they do with these characters here. That there's slow reveals, and particularly in terms to figure out who is this old crone, this woman. We're about to find out. She's the Reverend Mother Gaius Mohiam, Proctor Superior of the Bene Gesserit School on Wallach 9, which is a lot of information. There's Brad saying, "Good morning, all. Here for a good time. Not a long time today. Work calls." No worries, Brad. Thanks very much for joining us as always. We'll keep nattering. You keep listening. No worries. And as I said, folks, chirp in with any wee comments that you might have or any suggestions. They're always good. Now, at this point, I suppose this is the way. Let me just put this in the book. I do need to turn the page. Yeah, we get quite a lot of information. And of course, we know that we've always got the book, the terminology of the Imperium at the back. So we have this she's a Reverend Mother. She's a Proctor Superior. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what a Proctor is, there's a few different interpretations of what a Proctor is. You could say that a Proctor is a practitioner of ecclesiastical law, is one interpretation. And that kind of probably would fit with Mohiam's character. But a proctor can also be an invigilator within a school who's generally responsible for discipline. And that, I'd argue, actually, both of these senses of what a proctor is, excuse me, work really well with the Reverend Mother. Yeah. And observation, obviously. We get a little bit about Wallach 9. Now, this is the good one. I quite like this. It's the way Herbert sort of sends us to do our work if we're interested. Again, a lot of these things we should probably just look them up in the back of the book. And what we get here is 9th planet. Wallach 9 is the 9th planet of Lao Jin, site of the mother school of the Bene Gesserit. And if we have a bit of a mind on us, Lao Jin is spelled Laoujin here. Oh, sorry, Jin, I believe. Yeah. Let me just check that. Oh, but so yeah, if we go looking that up, again, we'll not really get any information whatsoever. But if we want to go and do a wee bit of research, what we can find out is this: that Lao Jin is named from Mount Lao Jin, which is also known as Jingxi Mountain. Excuse me. And Mount Lao Jin, I'll just spell that for you in English characters. It's Laojun. And again, this is the teacher school of the Bene Gesserit. And if we do a wee bit of research, we'll find out that this mountain is fundamentally associated with Lao Tzu, or Lao Tzu, as he's also known. And it was also his home. So Lao Tzu is the founder of Taoism, if you like, considered to be the author of the Tao Te Ching. I hope I'm pronouncing all of these things right, folks. Which is the path, the way of virtue, if you like, not to be confused with the I Ching at all. So there's quite a lot of, again, religious association at the very least. In fact, we have an association with the founder of a major religion. We've had that as well already. We've looked at Jessica and her association through name with Abraham. And we have a couple of the stars, as I said, planets' names associated with particular myths. And we really are bouncing all over the place here, aren't we? We're into Taoism and over to China. We've had French, German, we've got Arabian myths, we've got Greek stuff, all sorts here. And we're only 3 chapters in. A real cultural melting pot, and lots of little clues for the detailed reader. And one of the things that I do when I teach English is I often find that a lot of students, that in terms of, they're not that keen to expand their vocabulary, and often when they see certain words, I think I've said this before, they'll take an association with the meaning. They'll think they know what it means and progress. Usually based on I suppose semantic logic. But there's all sorts of words out there, and as I think I pointed out, there's over 2 million words in the English language, and I think a third of them are Latin or Greek. So it's always good to have a wee sort of nosy if you've got a mind to. Having a computer and the internet these days to look stuff up is great. I'm still quite old fashioned. I have my dictionary and my thesaurus about me, and a full set of encyclopedias. So I have if the internet goes down, as long as there's daylight or light, I can see what I'm doing. I can look stuff up, So I just thought that was a very interesting little association with the Bene Gesserit school, associated with Taoism. We talk about the way and the voice, these kind of things. And of course, the way, the Tao of virtue, is what the Tao Te Ching is. And it's these little associations, religious, mythological, etc., keep building up within this story. So yeah, and okay, over the page. So we get a reinforcement. I asked you a question, Jessica. We haven't had an answer to this. What on earth did you think you were doing? and the old woman's voice was snappish. I think what's interesting about Mohiam's voice is it's quite mercurial. It changes quite a lot. A lot of the characters have a particular musical tone association with them, if you like. Jessica's a contralto, the Baron's a basso, this kind of thing. But there's all sorts of ways that her voice is described. Um, and as I said, I think quite mercurial, changing quite a bit. And so we get this snap back from Jessica. What? Oh, Jessica tore her attention away from the past and faced the Reverend Mother, who sat with her back to the stone wall between the two west windows. What do you want me to say? So we have this same framing from the previous chapter. Again, we talked about how initially the meeting with the Reverend Mothers set up with the windows on either side. We had a kind of similar framing with the Baron and the globe in the room and the oval table. And let me see. And so it's just reiterating. We've got this. We're still in the sort of same situation. So it's reiterating that setup there. Chaya's saying, let's have a look. Chaya's got to be calling. Side note, I caught the recording of Friday's chat, Doc. Do you have Frank Herbert's Santa Roga Barrier? Also wanted to recommend Lucifer's Hammer by Pornell, Jerry A. Pornell. Santa Roga Barrier. The book that I couldn't remember, Chaya, I think I sent you a wee comment that the one that's missing from my bookshelf was Soul Catcher. My memory always gets there. I should have Santa Roga Barrier, I think. Let's see. The Sari Experiment. There it is. Yeah. There we go. Again, quite another one of these wee sort of thin ones. Goodness gracious, yeah. Have I scribbled all over this? Not too much. No, it's quite pristine. So there we go. Yes, indeed. I actually have all of his novels in China, but I've had a bit of. I lost a few books a few years back due to I was renting a house, and well, it's a long time ago now. When I was doing the PhD, and it rotted into two of my bookcases and destroyed about, I don't know, 200-300 books. So sometimes I'm oh yes, I have that book, and then I suppose it's hard for me to kind of pick up an inventory of all the books that I lost. But yeah, there's Frank's Santa Roga Barrier. Excuse me. Santa Roga seemed to be nothing more than a prosperous farm community, but there was something different about Santa Roga. Santa Roga had no juvenile delinquency nor any crime at all. Outsiders found no house for sale or rent in this valley, and no one ever moved out. No one bought cigarettes in Santa Roga. No cheese, wine, beer, or produce from outside the valley could be sold there. The list went on and grew stranger and stranger. Maybe Santa Roga was the last outpost of American individualism. Maybe they were just a bunch of religious cooks. Or maybe there was something extraordinary at work in Santa Roga, something far more disturbing than anyone could imagine. There we go. That's the blurb on the back. Cover art by Paul Yule. You can see, I think it's quite a modern one, these. This kind of version. A whole bunch of my Frank Herbert books are quite old. As you know, kind of as I said, like the Green Brain, they're very tatty, kind of pulpy type books. You know. There you go. Just thought I'd read you a wee bit of the blurb from that one. Thought the focus on psychedelics was well connected to Dune. Yes, I can't remember that one. I have to say, Chaya, that's kind of where I'm at, I suppose. But again, when I was doing a lot of the reading on Frank Herbert, I was really piling through the stuff quite quickly because I had so much to do, and it was really just to try. I was looking for other things within Dune. Or sorry, other nods to Dune or developments to Dune. And I'll tell you what I'll do, Chaya, is I have a thing that I did. It's probably the last piece of work from my PhD that I haven't actually shared with anybody. I've kind of just tried to put absolutely everything to do with it up. But what I do have, believe it or not, is my first year Viva presentation as a slideshow. And it's basically it's me covering all of Frank's books and pointing out a few wee things about them, different themes, and what I suppose grouping them. And trying to kind of present them in a certain way. So I'll see. I'll see if I can get. What I'll do is I'll try and load up the PowerPoint onto OBS Studio, and space out the slides a wee bit so they can. I'm trying to just turn it into a wee video, if you like. I think there's about 20 slides or something on Frank Herbert as he was at that time. Psychedelic era is a great thing, I have to say. I'm a very big fan of psychedelic rock music. And I suppose a lot of the counterculture of this of the 50s and the 60s, I think, and the 70s. In fact, counterculture is pretty much me. But yeah, it's interesting. I think Frank, whenever we talk about Dune and drugs, Frank's a bit sketchy. There's discussions about his drug use in his biography by Brian Herbert, Dreamer of Dune. And I think it kind of presents that Frank tried a bit of acid, this kind of thing, once and didn't like it. And I would suggest he's maybe invested a wee bit of time in taking those all sorts of things back then. Maybe you kind of have to. It'd be hard to think of hard to think of this book being written by someone who has not had a drug experience. I mean, we talked last week, actually, we actually separated these out a wee bit and talked about them. The last chapter, we got an introduction to a whole pile of different drugs. With the Baron and Piter, etc. We let me just see. And some of them sound pretty strange, but we had Samuta, wasn't it? And there we go. And verite or verite, depending on, one that makes you tell the truth, and the other one that sends you into the throes of ecstasy, isn't it? But it's Samuta is associated with music, in particular, and of course we've got Malaj. There are all sorts of drugs in Dune, and I think it's product of its times, as we always say. What is it, the one they used to say over here? Whenever we get out of the 80s, the 90s are going to make the 60s look like the 50s. I lived in London in the 90s, so it's a very true statement. So there, yeah. But yes, I'll try and do that, Chaya. It's probably a good thing to refresh my memory on Frank's other stuff. But if you want a good wee bit of insight into some of Frank's other books, by the way, the Timothy O'Reilly book on Frank Herbert's pretty good. But let me see. I think we mentioned a couple of these kind of. There's a Spark Notes book, which is awful, not with, but this is a real old one. I think these old Cliff Notes, and let me see. This one is Dune and Other Works, and this is a really good. If you had, I have to say, this is one of the best wee sort of brief study guides just on an author really that I've ever read. Actually, it's just quite good. And if you didn't know much about Frank Herbert, what this one includes is the life of Frank Herbert. Talks a wee bit about science fiction. The book of Frank Herbert, the words of Frank Herbert, Dune Messiah, Unity and Continuity of Dune and Dune Messiah, The God Makers, Under Pressure, Destination Void, The Eyes of Heisenberg, The Green Brain, The Santaroga Barrier, Whipping Star, and Hellstrom's Hive. And this one's done by L. David Allen, who's an MA at the Department of English, University of Nebraska. So I'm not too sure when this was published. Let me see. 1975, yeah. And I absolutely love the cover, by the way. Check that out. Isn't that science fiction heaven right there? And it seems to be quite June-ish, actually, apart from the rocket and Robbie the robot there. But I thought I got this years and years ago before I did the PhD, and just thought it was a very good wee book, actually. Oh goodness, I better catch up a wee bit here. Let's see. Lord Crunk says, "Hi, Lord Crunk." There's David Segovia saying hi. Hi, folks. Lord Frank Herbert and Alan Watts hung out. I guess some imbibing took place. I would argue probably more of a drinker. I think maybe it's hard to imagine a book so focused on religious myth not spending time on psychedelics in some way. Yeah. It's interestingly enough, Chai, I was chatting to my wife about what are called mysteries in Greek religion. And let me just check this one out if I can remember which of the Greek mysteries. I think it was the Elysian mysteries. It's to do with Aeschylus. Let's have a wee look at Aeschylus. You've got to love Aeschylus, by the way. You don't have to love him. I love him. I think he's brilliant. Let me see. Life. I'm pretty sure Aeschylus was prosecuted. There we go. Let me just check this for you, folks. Aeschylus was one of many Greeks who were initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, an ancient cult of Demeter based in his hometown of Eleusis. And initiates gained secret knowledge through these rites, likely concerning the afterlife. Firm details of specific rites are sparse, blah, blah, blah. Members are sworn under the penalty of death not to reveal anything about the mysteries to non-initiates. Nevertheless, according to Aristotle, Aeschylus was accused of asebia for revealing some of the cult's secrets on stage. There we go. Other sources claim, this is just reading off Wikipedia, by the way, I would check these things. Claimed that an angry mob tried to kill Aeschylus on the spot, but he fled the scene. He took refuge at an altar in the orchestra of the Theatre of Dionysus, pleaded ignorance at his trial, and was acquitted, with the jury sympathetic to the military service of him and his brothers during the Persian Wars. So, it doesn't go into detail here, but my understanding is that he revealed that, how are these people kind of getting in touch with their their deities, etc. And his magic mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, pretty much. So there you go. So it was wine and magic mushrooms, and you'll find that alcohol, probably from a certain point of the development of alcohol, which is quite an interesting thing. The history of alcohol, viniculture, that kind of thing. But yeah, there's a lot of suggestions to do with the use of sacred mushrooms, this kind of thing. And you'll find Robert Graves discusses this quite a bit as well. But it was definitely a thing. So I'm pretty sure that's what Aeschylus was. They weren't too happy with him for revealing that that's what they were doing. And Aeschylus, if you don't know, is the father of Greek tragedy, with 7 plays. And of course, we're going to talk about him a wee bit with this, because he's the author of the Oresteia, which is the Agamemnon, the libation bearers, and the kindly ones, the 3 plays, and that we've talked about within the Pelopid line and so on. And of course, Prometheus Bound and 7 Against Thebes. So 7 of his plays survive, and the father of tragedy was killed. I think an eagle dropped a tortoise shell or something like that, a tortoise on his head, and killed him. I must check that out. I'm pretty sure it's true. But yeah, so there we go. Wasn't the Oracle of Delphi on some drug? Oh, okay. It's a really interesting one, the Oracle of Delphi. All to do with prophecy associated with Apollo. And the Pythoness, of course, is what she's sometimes known. Yes, there's a few different things about that, Chai. I would have to look into it in detail, but my understanding is it's to do with possibly drugs, but arguably it would have been fumes, basically. Noxious fumes, I believe. Something like that, maybe sulfur. I'm not too sure. But yes, the Oracle of Delphi. There's different oracles throughout the ancient world, but arguably the Oracle of Delphi is the most famous one. And yeah, if you actually have a look on Wikipedia at the Oracle of Delphi, it'll probably tell you a fair bit about her. Different ones over the years, but you have to understand that almost an awful lot of major historical events in the ancient world either occur or don't occur because someone goes to this Pythoness for a prophecy, basically, and it's a real thing, and it lasts for a long time. It lasts well into the Roman times. So yeah, very interesting, the Oracle of Delphi. And of course, we've looked at the Pelopid line recently, guys. So you can see how within those stories the Oracle features quite heavily, actually, particularly to do with Atreides and Thyestes and so on, you know. Let's see. Something I noticed that. Oh, right. Let's see. Something I noticed was that the desert research bases had fallen into disuse a lot more recently than I had thought, as they were being used the generation before. Desert research bases fall into disuse. Yeah, there's a whole lot to do with those bases, actually, Brad. I've done a wee bit of an episode on. I think if you look at the episode on the planetologist subject, I think there's a bunch of stuff in there. And if you actually, the kind of the chronology of the desert research bases actually brings up a lot of questions, and you kind of want to start plotting. Well, who's on Arrakis first? There's the bases, blah blah blah. You know, this kind of thing. The botanical test. I think it's the botanical testing stations you're talking about. And they thought they were idle a lot longer. Janice says, thought they were abandoned officially before Kain's father found them. Yeah, I think they were pretty much, they were shut down, weren't they? And you're going back a fair bit in time. But and I think it's got something to do with the worms, or probably the discovery of melange. But it's one of those things that you kind of want to we'll have a look at it as we go, guys. That's the whole point of doing this, I suppose. Whenever we hit them, we'll start getting some details and try and piece it together. But it's trying to figure out when they arrive, who's on the planet first, basically, and when do the stations come, who arrives after, what happened, and why are they shut down? And then, of course, I think Chai is absolutely correct there. It's Pardo that kind of gets them going again. But we also have to assume, I suppose, that the interesting thing I think within the Pfeiffer-like system, Chaya, is that what was Pardo's father up to? And one of the things we mention about, I know we've headed off a wee bit here, but one of the things we talk about when it comes to Pardo and Liet Kynes is that they're one of the few rare good examples of the Pfeiffer-like system working. So Liet Kynes is an ecologist because his father is an ecologist. Pardo Kynes should have been an ecologist because of his father, if you see what I mean. And so where was he and what was he doing? You're arguing that almost every planet should have an ecologist, I think, but Primal Gas, like in Hercules Returns. I love Hercules Returns. China, I thought the father used them. He was discovering them and cannibalizing them as needed. There you go, Factor. Thank you. Hi, Factor. Thanks for joining us. So yeah, and a wee bit interesting. And I've kind of just jumped off topic there. I think, psychedelics, absolutely. And it's a great era for it, isn't it? I think that a lot of if you're familiar with your beatniks and stuff like that, we're really kicking off in the 50s. I think. If I remember, Frank, he bought a 6-acre property in an area northeast of Washington on the Olympic Peninsula. There he established a self-sufficient ecological reserve. Quite possible. I think the other place. I think famously, I'm not too sure of the details, but I think he had a place in Hawaii, didn't he? And as you were saying, I think the idea was that he was wanting to create, I suppose, a homestead that was actually, as much as say self-sufficient, he wanted it to. I think Herbert wanted it to produce more energy than it used, possibly. I think he also harvested some kind of hallucinogenic mushroom. Well, there you go. If I don't know, mushroom use is still pretty common, I think, these days. It's one of the drugs, I suppose. In this country, it's not illegal to take them. It's just illegal to store and prepare them, I believe. Which probably arguably means washing them or something, but you can just go pick them. I suppose there's quite a few different mushrooms these days. It depends, I suppose, on how academic his knowledge is of the drug world at the time, and it is the 60s, so we're not, it's not quite the same. It's all this kind of peace and love and all that kind of thing. But I'd argue, I suppose it's psychedelics, the hallucinogenic drugs can do a fair amount of damage to your mind if you're not particularly strong, or some people can't handle them, I think. I don't know. I can tell you a wee story about a tramp I used to know in London, and I don't know if I should, but I don't know if it's a kind of thing that it may the person I'm talking about at the time may have been Peter Green, and most of the people that I knew suspected it was Peter Green actually living in London. I might be completely wrong. I wouldn't want to say too much about it, but there was the idea that kind of being locked into a trip, this kind of thing. But it was a homeless guy in London, not homeless, it was a big trolley and stuff like that. And a friend of mine got evicted for putting him up one night when it was snowing. But he was a reasonably nice guy, and he looked exactly like him anyway. And I know not long after that, a bunch of different musicians kind of helped them out and so on. Peter Green from Fleetwood Mac, I'm talking about, by the way, folks. But yeah, so there's issues with, I suppose, this kind of thing. I suppose if you know Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception, of course, you know that there's an addendum to that, really, which is heaven and hell. So these things can go either way, if you know what I mean. Let's see, where do we leave off in the book? Just to catch up a wee bit here. And again, thank you. Let's keep the banter going, folks. Any wee questions, fire away, and any wee comments, fire away. I love it, absolutely love it. So we've got let me see. Just one final thing. Again, we've been talking about hands here, and of course, we know that Paul doesn't come out of the Gom-Jabbar uninjured. He's injured himself by digging his fingertips into his hand, and we get this memory of Jessica's right hand and her remembering the pain, the terror, and the anger. And again, this is kind of just, I think, really designed to show us that Jessica doesn't just have sympathy for Paul, and she's his mother, but she has empathy for him, and that there's something more to this test, I suppose. But she's been through this before. Let me see if I can. This is where we start wrecking the spines of books, where we try to get them to sit nice for us without putting something too heavy on top. There we go. Let's see if you'll stay open there. Right. Oh, what the heck. You know what? I've wrecked that many copies of Dune. What's one more? I have to say, I feel quite bad about that sometimes, but there is a reason for it. All mushrooms are edible, some only once. Terry Pratchett, excellent. I totally agree. When was The Doors of Perception written? Is my copy here? I don't know. Quite a while back, actually. 30s, I thought. Let me check. Maybe later. No, much later. Hang on. Sorry. What am I thinking on? Probably thinking of some other Huxley stuff. It's published in 1954 and discusses his influences under masculine in May 1953. And then we have two works since often been published together. Heaven and Hell is the 56, which is another essay and elaborates his reflections further there. I haven't read it since I was at university, but I read an awful lot of this kind of stuff at university. Very enjoyable. Huxley's quite good, actually. So there we go. So the 50s, yeah. And of course, the Doors take their name from that book, for example. Chai is saying, fate is never tested with the Gom-Jabbar. Why try to save a bloodline that might not be human? Well, I think if Fade undertook the Gom-Jabbar, I think he'd be killed. I think Fade's too in the head, and not completely, but I think that's the point. I might be wrong, but I get that we're all human at the end of the day. There's this play between humans and animals, and I think it's more to do with a level of viciousness, and sadism, and that kind of thing, a psychopathy. And that's what they don't really want. They would consider that kind of person more like an animal, I think. But why would they save his bloodline? Well, to breed him. Just because he's an animal doesn't mean he won't necessarily produce a child, I suppose. The one thing that we always do note about that is that the Bene Gesserit at this point are actively trying to merge but they're actively they're inbreeding at this point. And this is going to be, it's kind of incest. Of course, Paul will explain this to us later when he knows that he's a Harkonnen, because they wanted his genes, not his perception or awareness. Nature and nurture make the person. Excellent. Yes, indeed. Nature versus nurture as well. Those old arguments that have been discussed very, very often throughout literature. And I think, particularly in science fiction, but you'll things like Shakespeare, the Tempest, the nature versus nurture discussion there. I love the Tempest, by the way. It's I think probably my favorite Shakespeare play. But it's we get these kind of things with our noble savage characters as well. Things like in Brave New World, this kind of thing. So yeah, it's a big, and I suppose how much of Paul, is nature and how much is nurture. That we'll get to. So we're getting to that because how Paul's brought up is very, very important, I think. And we're going to next chapter we're going to hit his tutors, if I'm not mistaken, and the fact that he has no friends of his own age, but he has companion tutors, and he has his mother. His teachers are his friends and his companions in that sense. But how you're educated, how you educate yourself, how you're brought up, very, very important, and the environment around you. China says, so human per Bene Gesserit is a function of nature. Human for the Bene Gesserit is a function of nature. I wouldn't say, I suppose so. Possibly, I don't know. I suppose the question arises: does a psychopath come out of nature or nurture or both? I think and arguably we're all a product of both. I don't know. We're talking about my big dog Holly. Holly lived on her own from being a pup up until about the age. When we got her to a vet, the vet really figured out that she was about 4 months old based on her teeth, and she'd been living in a ruined house in the chimney for shelter with a toilet to drink out of, and was skeletal when we found her, but she had survived all that time on her own. And whenever we found our dog, she just about, it was time to give up. She had so badly dehydrated and hadn't been fed, and she just walked out in front of it. So in front of our car, we took her home. But I'm often amazed at how she survived. And with a level of cruelty, I suppose, put on her as well by whoever owned her first. Fact and non-verbal says that's what I took, but it's the mixture also. Can't train a mental patient. Yeah, and it's it's, as I said, Herbert plays with quite a lot of these wee ideas here, and it's interesting to see where he takes them. As I said, not all of his ideas are spot on, and we have a degree of, if you think about it, that the Gom Jabbar test is pretty cruel, isn't it? It's a threat of imminent death, torture, and pain. There's nothing good about it really in that sense. When Jessica's saying that she remembers, it's her right hand that remembers. It's pain, terror, and anger afterwards. I think it's the same with Paul. He's angry. And why wouldn't you be angry at somebody who did that? I personally understand that, in my own thinking, why would you let anyone like that ever near you for 1 second, ever again? And if I was Paul, I'd have the old woman in chains before speaking to her ever again. She just tried to kill me. That's the way I would look at it, and I wouldn't put any positive spin on it. The fact that the Bene Gesserit do is all part of their viewpoint, I think, the high-handed, unavoidable enemy. Got me thinking about fate a little bit the other day. Free will and determinism. I actually think I might have made a wee note about it in this, folks. But there we go. Yeah. As I said, I think all of this is to show where we were talking about Jessica's empathy for Paul. And it's to show us that she's not an unfeeling monster, basically, because this poor Paul, and otherwise, because honestly, as I said, if we had any sort of real sense about us, we'd be wondering what kind of mother is this. And it turns out that she's going to be she's an exceptional human being, just like Paul. So we get this. Just moving on with the wee conversation here, we have the Reverend Mother going, there's a bit of back and forth between Jessica and the Reverend Mother, Gaius, Helen, Mohiam here, and they're poking at each other, prodding each other, goading each other for reactions. I think, and it's with the Reverend Mother deliberately kind of just I think trying to make Jessica angry a wee bit here. Again, probably for some sort of cathartic reasons to get just to express her feelings, you know. But we get this kind of little bit of response from Jessica. What would you like? What do you want me to say? And again, the Reverend Mother kind of just feeds this back at her. What do I want you to say? What do I want you to say? You know, this is the again with the Helen Mohiam's voice. The old woman carried a tone of cruel mimicry. Um, and it has the desired response. So I had a son, you know, and again and this is the thing. There's a level of awareness with these characters. They're aware of what's going on. She knows that it gets the desired response, you know, and Jessica's aware of being goaded deliberately by the Reverend Mother. You know, and I said they're it's just like Piter and the Baron poking at each other, and we'll also get these similar silences in this chapter. So again, we're really getting a like for like compare and contrast. Excuse me. Um, and in fact, the Reverend Mother, Gaius, Helen, Mohiam, and Jessica here, their behavior is so much like the Baron and Piters in the previous chapter. The words aren't the same, the emotions aren't the same, but they're feeding off each other in a certain way. And I think it ends up in a very satisfactory way at the end of the chapter here. Of course, we have to ask, what's wrong with having a son? You know, if we're new to the book, what's that about? You know. Chaya says, I think the fact that he knew his mum had been through the test helped. I agree. And also the wee bit where the Reverend Mother sort of lets him know that it takes a fair measure of, you know, strength and character to stand on the other side of that door. So that there is a wee bit of that. The Reverend Mother is trying to do a wee bit of damage mitigation here. And yes, I think that's right. Chaya, it probably does mellow him a wee bit, but we'll see Paul's responses here. Brad says, I think they tested Paul because he was unexpected, not planned. So they needed to see what they had to deal with, whereas Fade was what was planned and wanted for breeding purposes a known quantity. That's a good point. Chai says, good point. Factor says, I agree. Yeah, so Fade is, of course, Paul's meant to be a girl, and the idea is to breed that girl to the Harkonnen heir, which is going to be Fade. So, yeah. And then we should get the Kwisatz Haderach, shouldn't we? So it's also suggested, I don't know, that, you know, bad genes we were talking about, why would you want to breed them? But it's that they get to something, you know. Brad says, yeah, may have finally got something right. I don't know. There's no rights or wrongs with it, Brad, I suppose. But it's a very good point. So well done, sir. Interpretations is a many varied thing, isn't it? And how we look at things. I suppose you've just got my voice going here, and all I can really do is read the text, etc. We're not kind of on a round table thing. So hopefully I'm not pushing my ideas too heavily, but I really do like bringing yours in, guys, and it's not to detract in any way from them. They're all good and they're all valid. Yeah, and asking questions helps us see through to the truth of the matter, doesn't it? Like kind of almost a Bene Gesserit aphorism there. In fact, it says Jessica probably let them test Paul to argue for his protection from the Bene Gesserit before the big bushwhack. They've said, yeah, Fade was the ideal for breeding purposes, a strong Harkonnen animal. Yeah, the one thing that doesn't make sense with it all, guys, as we've pointed out, is why wait all this time. And there's a suggestion, I suppose, when we look at Jessica's remembrance of her ordeal, that it's during puberty or just around puberty, and it's maybe that the test has to be maybe administered around that point, on the cusp of adulthood, as you see, if you see what I mean. But the one thing that I always wonder is, why does it take the Reverend Mother 15 years to come here, and 15 years to ask Jessica these questions? They could have had a fair bit of info, prior to this. But it's a book, and we're just at the beginning, and we do have to suspend our disbelief a wee bit, don't we? There we go. So yeah, but it's interesting. I think we had that. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to say? What do you want? That kind of mimicry going back and forth. The repetitions there again, and the fact again, like Paul being aware of his own anxiety in the previous chapter. Um, Jessica here is very aware of being goaded, aware of her own anger. And we get a little bit more. This is the chapter where we're going to get a good bit about the Bene Gesserit, by the way, folks. The epigraph at the start, much as it's Alia talking from the family commentaries of Muad'Dib by Irulan, it really is pointing out the qualities of a Reverend Mother. That she's a courtesan, and also this, virgin goddess kind of thing, untouchable. Alia has a number of these attributes that we'll see later on, I suppose, which is maybe why she's mentioned there. And it gives us a wee bit of a mystery in terms of Alia as well. But we get to this point where this back and forth between two, and it's quite insightful. And you were told, so I had a son, Jessica flared, and she knew she was being goaded into this anger deliberately. She knows it. You were told to bear only daughters to the Atreides. It meant so much to him, Jessica pleaded, and you, in your pride, thought you could produce the Kwisatz Haderach. So, as I said, we were asking earlier, what's so bad about having a son? But we're told that she's been told to have only daughters. And the reasoning behind it, it means to him, it's all about Leto's desires. And so the point is, Leto Atreides wants a son. And he wants a son more than anything, and he does not want a daughter, I suppose. The fact that he wants a son, it's really important that he has a male child. We know that I think noble houses are also run by women in the Dune universe. So it's a question of what's that all about, I suppose. And would a daughter being born to him have been so bad? But we're talking about Jessica's pride here. So the reasons for doing it is it's done for Leto. It's done for Leto's desire. But we're then let me just read it, folks. Sorry. What's the word? And you in your pride thought you could produce the Kwisatz Haderach. So I just thought it was a wee interesting point here. I'd point out that pride is hello, Holly, is a cardinal sin, isn't it, in Christianity? But for those of you maybe who don't know, within Greek philosophy, according to Aristotle, I'll give you the quote: "Pride is the crown of virtues. It's the greatest of virtues," and I suppose it's to do with how you interpret things like that. Let me see. Read Oresteia and arete, isn't that it? I think in Greek, arete, I believe, is the word, and it means excellence. There's a kind of philosophy in ancient Greece that if you go about your business, what is it you do? How do you know you're any good at it? I suppose, and so I suppose they have arete, excellence. You work at your to take pride in your work, try hard at it, if you know what I mean. Oresteia then is a kind of competition. And a gon is the struggle, if you know. So you have a gon, a rate, and Oresteia. A gon is the struggle. You know how you go through things, how you work at them to get good. Arete is taking pride, excellence in your own work, and then if you want Oresteia is where you enter into competition. No, that term is also related to kind of one-on-one combat within the Iliad and the Odyssey, if you like. Excuse me, Oresteia. So it's whenever two heroes fight off against each other. That's also called that, but the sense of competition. So we have desire, we have pride there, and also we're sort of talking about what Jessica can produce, and we're also Jessica sensed the possibilities. Oh, Holly, love. Oh, that's my big dog. She's looking to play. Oh, be a big sausage. Go on, go play. Oh, you all right? Sorry about that. Oh, what have you got there? 1 second, folks. My dog has just nicked my ink. Oh dear. Thank you very much, Holly. Not my ink cartridge. You all right, pet? Sorry about that. Are you okay? Oh, she's okay. She just came in there and brought me my ink cartridge. I don't know what's going on there. She's okay to stay if she's not barky woof woof too much. Sorry about that, folks. Just got interrupted by our doggy Holly Holiday there. BG could be punishing Jessica for her disobedience and bearing a son. Hubris isn't a virtue. No, it isn't. There's the concept of pride to excess. Yeah, particularly in Greek mythology. It's a particular type of hubris is acting like a god in that sense. I think, or you're acting in kind of that your pride is to the point where you're behaving as if you were a god. So, for Agamemnon, when he returns home, Clytemnestra goads him into walking on the carpet barefoot, and it's a red or purple carpet, which is a thing only for the gods themselves. For the Greeks, Judaism criticizes pride, extols humility. Yeah, it's pride's a bad thing, and I think all the Abrahamic religions, isn't it? And as I said, in Greek philosophy, it's a very good thing. But it's the whole. I think the pride comes before a fall. Certainly within Christianity, that kind of thing. Off you go, love. Go on. Go see Wendy. Wendy, love. Oh, you okay? Sorry, I thought she was about to start barking. Oh, there you go. You just looking a bit of love. So just there we go, folks. This is what I'm dealing with here. This big thing. You all right, big sauce? Huh? Do you want out? Is that it? You have to go get Wendy to let you out. Do you want out? Go see Wendy. Go on. Are you okay? Oh, just hanging in. That's okay. I'm not too bothered if you aren't, as long as she doesn't bark too much. That you show the world and the internal motivation. Oh, sorry, I missed something. As someone pointed out, it may have been done for Lita, but also done for Jessica's ego. I think it was the other Dune Doctor who said that fits with the concept of two motivations: the one that you show the world and the internal motivation. Yeah, that's a good point. We've got a wee bit of that coming up here. The struggle, the internal, and the tension. Two motivations. Well, yeah, and yes, that's a big thing. I suppose we get people who serve two masters, don't we? And that's a very good point. There you go. You're on fire today, Brad. That's another very good point. The Reverend Mother serves two masters. Sorry, Gaius Helen Mohiam serves two masters. Jessica serves two masters in a sense. And there are lots. What do we get? Duncan Idaho serving two masters. Leah Kynes serving two masters. So, excuse me, folks. I need to blow my nose very quickly. I'm going to start sneezing. Sorry about that. I got my wisdom teeth out a wee while back. Not too long ago. And ever since then, it's created, I don't know, all the space in my mouth and nose has changed. And I get this little thing that happens in my nose, and I immediately know I'm going to sneeze. And it's not a sneezy thing, if you know what I mean. You probably don't know what I mean, but it's very weird. Apologies, folks. Yeah, what you're saying there, Brad, very quickly, if I can run back to it there. That's the good thing about putting all these notes down. Where are we? Right at where are we? It's about, if I can remember it. Oh, dear. Is it the second epigraph? Understanding, seeing, and knowing. That's it. That's what I was after there. Yeah, there's a fair bit of that, as what we can see, what we know, and are often very, very different things in Dune, aren't they? We've got foreshadowing, but we actually have foreknowledge and absolute foreknowledge as well, and sometimes, So once again, the other wee thing I just wanted to point out, Jessica lifted her chin. I sensed the possibility. And we'll come back to that wee bit near the end when we talk about how the Reverend Mother looks at it. But she's fully aware of what she's done. And I think the Reverend Mother will point this out in a wee second here if I just catch up to where I'm at in my book here. So the Duke's desire for a son, It's not her own desire for a Kwisatz Haderach, but she's well aware of it. And the other thing I wanted to point is, once again, we're 3 chapters in, and everybody's talking about Leto, but we don't see Leto. He's always out of sight, and he's just. And I think it's quite an interesting little technique to keep him hidden from the reader at this point. So we were just saying, an Atreides' daughter could have been married to a Harkonnen heir and sealed the breach. We may lose both bloodlines now, and so there are consequences to Jessica's actions in regards to the Bene Gesserit breeding program. I'll just show you what I did here, folks, just for I don't know if anybody was watching the whole Game of Thrones shenanigans that was. There you go. If you can see the wee thing at the top, let me see. Harkonnen Hart Atreides equals Kwisatz. Dear oh dear, that was quite bad, wasn't it? So yeah, and I think it's interesting. Chai was saying, what I thought was fascinating is that what Chai was saying is hubris isn't a virtue, and we were talking about pride. How certain qualities are seen in different cultures or different religions is quite interesting, I think. And pride's Northern Ireland's land of, I suppose, Christianity, in a very, very dark form, I think. But yeah, pride before a fall, this kind of thing, you're not allowed to be. Not that I hang in such religious circles at all, but it's a big. These kind of things are quite big over here, and people believe them, which is quite sad. I used the word pride actually at my mother's eulogy. So that, what was the main quality of my mother, and that it was pride in her family and her home and her sons and this kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that at all, Let's see. Just catch up with your comments for a wee seconds. Judaism criticized product, souls humility. Show the word. Oh yeah, sorry. Paul struggling. China saying Paul struggling over serving himself and his family versus humanity's needs for survival. Yes. Brad saying the change in the view of pride through the Abrahamic religions is what Friedrich Nietzsche called the inversion of morality, and he wrote the greatest sin of the Abrahamic religions is it declares itself. The only morality. Goodness, I thought it was just that it declares itself. Yes. It's a shame the other doctor couldn't be present for today. I think she could have shared a lot in this conversation. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm still waiting for my copy of Kara's book. She promised me one in the post, but I've actually got the publisher's version of it, and I'm really looking forward to tearing through it. Actually, but yeah, I think Kara's work's pretty good. The one thing I always pointed out, Brad, was that when I was doing my work, I got just slaughtered with had to throw out pretty much half of it, and a lot of the stuff that was lost would have been things on sex and gender, the Bene Gesserit, blah blah blah, the honored matres. Looking at those kind as major themes within evolution, attached to evolution, and therefore my work comes across. I think I said this when we did the book launch with Kara. My work comes across as quite male centric because of what was ripped out of it. And it was heading that way because of the I was approaching it from the biggest. Let's go with the major theme for take the themes in order of prominence, if you like, But absolutely. And I'll tell you what, guys, if you're you can get just for anybody who's not aware of it, Cara Kennedy's book is Women's Agency in the Dune Universe. And if you pop over to, I know some of the details have probably changed, but her website would be dunescholar.com. The book's an academic book, so it might be a bit pricey for some people. But the way to get your hands on one of these things is pop into your local library and get them to order it. So it's definitely something, it's going to lend itself to the realm of Dunelore. And I think I was saying it's kind of encouraged me maybe to try and get mine. As much as I've published my PhD, I haven't done it in book form. I've done it on YouTube and made history. But it would be nice, actually. I've been thinking about maybe trying to get in touch with a couple of publishers and see what we can do, Let's just catch it. The kind of world is coming from God, not man. Sorry, hang on. Abraham it declares itself the only morality, but they claim the morality is coming from God, not man. Only God can dictate morality. People change like the wind. Absolutely. It's a question of, for me, it's who is your God and where does he come from, or she? And within the Abrahamic religions, we can take the deity of the Abrahamic religion way back. So it's I used to say, Judaism as a religion kind of middle aged to me. I used to argue that Christianity and Islam are new kids on the block in terms of religion. They have not been around that long, though we might consider a couple of thousand years for Christianity, about 1400 years for Islam as quite a long time. But I don't, to be honest with you. But there we go. The idea in Dune, I suppose, that runs with something similar is that all religions, the Butlerian Jihad, and I suppose was it the Commission of Ecumenical Translators, and when they're creating the Orange Catholic Bible, they're looking for commonality, aren't they, in all religions? And I suppose I used to argue that I think almost all religions claim that they're the one true religion. I know there's a couple that don't. So yeah, again, there's always an exception to the rule. Let me see, but yes, it's the thing that Frank suggests that all religions have in common is he describes it as a commandment, isn't it? It's thou shalt not disfigure the soul. So it's pretty interesting, yeah. Let's see. What do we got? We got a bit of China's. Let's see. We got a bit of a religious discussion going. There's an obvious fallacy in the Bible. It tells you how to treat slaves. Now having slaves is considered immoral. So morality comes from man. Happy to do a deep dive on biblical slavery, but this isn't the best place. Biblical slavery was to pay off debt. The Exodus was showing the world wholesale slavery was immoral. Don't forget, Mormonism is practically a newborn babe, isn't it? Just Holy Joe Smith. Yes, gods are very much real, but they're human inventions, and religions are human institutions. I pretty much think, but it is interesting, and particularly within, I suppose, the religions in the Middle East part of the world, and branching into parts of Africa there. Yeah, I mean, going all the way back, if we want to go back to the Sumerian, Mesopotamian, we've got the Egyptian gods. There's such a commonality in the stories. And for example, I mean, I'm pretty sure that the Exodus is generally considered not factual, and that's by rabbinic scholars, I think, if I'm using the correct term these days. And from my own point of view, what we do, the reason why, I'll put it this way, folks, without really, hopefully not offending anybody in any way. The way I look at it is I'm fascinated by these things and I'm interested, but it's hard to talk about them sometimes without causing offense, and it's never the intent. But I like to get to the truth of the matter, and just in terms of history, which means to inquire into a thing. If we do look at certain things within the ancient world and broaden our scope to not look at any one culture in isolation, that's generally where the problem lies. The problem with a lot of these is that I can tell you where the stories came from, and there's this story from the Bible. Sorry, it's not from the Bible. It's actually from this, or it's from this, or there's a much older story. If you want to take your flood narrative, you can go to the same narrative exists in Greek mythology as the Deucalion myth. And we can go all the way back to the Matishum and the Gilgamesh myth, etc., etc. But there's a commonality, and the thing I think that's really interesting in terms of how religions change and morph and shape over the years is that people move, people travel, and some religions absorb others, and assimilation to a degree. And the Romans and the Greeks understand this very, very well. They understand that you don't need to slaughter a bunch of people to conquer them. That they have foreign policies, which are the Roman interpretation, Interpretatio Romana, is how to conquer a people by tricking them religiously, essentially, But, and of course, for those who've never heard of the Interpretatio Romana, it's also, there's the Greek interpretation, the Roman interpretation, and of course, lastly, the English interpretation, which is to do with your King James Bible, etc., etc. You know, so if you don't know what the Roman interpret, the one that you could probably research the best is the Roman interpretation. And I'll give you a good example of it is in England there's a city I think called, I'm not sure if it's a city or a town, but I'll go with city, called Bath, and you've probably all heard of Bath from a in terms of what it's famous for is its hot waters and spas and so on. So Bath is originally what is it? The Romans call it aqua solace. Pardon me, which is the waters of the goddess Solace. Pardon me, is what it means. And basically, whenever the Romans find the locals there, they turn up and they go, "Hey, who's this god you worship?" And they go, "Oh, this is our goddess Solace." Right? Ah, right, says the Romans. Here, bring him the high priest. Here's our high priest. He's the high priest of your goddess. You call her Solace because you speak a different language than us. We call her Minerva. So we'll tell you what, he's our high priest. Let's build a lovely new statue to your goddess and our goddess, which are the same goddess. And particularly places like Bath, you'll find this. And we'll give her a double-barreled name. Goddess becomes Minerva Solace. And this is how the Romans really work. You get this idea of Roman legions going around and just slaughtering people. It's not. There's a fair bit of that too, but it's not how empires work, and it's not how you control people. And at the end of the day, all an empire wants is all your money, basically, to flow, and authority over you. That's it. It's about taxes, really. So yeah. So simply put, I suppose it's a big thing, and archaeologically speaking, it's a big thing. It's a thing of real interest to me. You'll find great examples of this in Bath, Hadrian's Wall as well. Civilian site, military place, that kind of thing. David says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The whole thing, but I suppose for most people from a religious point of view, is that the generation after generation after generation, you've been told this is the word of God, etc., etc., this kind of thing. Generally, it's not that. I've said this, and I don't mean to be in any way blasphemous, by the way, because I can be arrested in this country for blasphemy, even though, yes, right, I'm in the United Kingdom, but blasphemy is illegal in Northern Ireland. Would you believe? You see, so we could say something naughty about Zeus, and that would technically be blasphemy. It's a simple question of, for me, it's first principles. Let's go to the beginning and find out. And don't, if you want to take Descartes, I suppose that idea of that everything you've been taught is probably nonsense. I left school thinking that very well, and it's served me very well. A lot of the things that I've been taught, and a lot of the schools are religious here, and they're thoroughly evil. To be honest with you, we've a hundreds and hundreds of years of just religious abuse in this country, and it's ongoing. And all our terrorists are Christians, by the way. So the idea that religion is a good thing does not exist in my world at all. And I mean my world in Northern Ireland. I don't mean I've known people from all over the world, and I've met people who practice their faith privately and without offending anyone, and I like those people and have no bother with them. But here, Christianity itself is, I'd argue, the number one force of evil in this country, and it's really bad. But we'll give your debt or a wife to produce kids and decide to be your slave for life. look at what Abraham, look what Abraham does with his wife in Exodus. Is he in Genesis as well? I'm trying to remember. And if you can figure out where Abraham comes from, that'll tell you an awful lot about him. By the way, I'll let you work it out, but you can work out where he comes from. It's very interesting. So I tend to think of a lot of these category peoples of the ancient worlds in terms of language as well, as opposed to religion. And even like if you take the cult of Zeus, worship of Zeus, there are thousands of variations of Zeus all over the place. Let's just but they'll give your debt or a wife. Decide to be your slave. Slavery is pretty common in the ancient world. It's still around today, folks. So it's not something that we can say has been dealt with. Happy to deep dive elsewhere. I've learned it with deep commentaries. It's not a simple concept, not at all. God, if we're trying to sort of point out a few of the religious and mythological, I suppose, nods that Dune has, and they kind of do help create a reasonably, there's a background structure to the world that speaks to a lot of us. And so we might not know a lot of these, we might not know too many of them, but we should know one or two. We've got another wee comment coming up, just that Jessica says you're not infallible. That's suggestive of the papacy, the papal infallibility, this kind of thing. And I think this is a good wee bit as well, because there's this silence again. And it just exactly mirrors what Peter and Baron were doing, this sort of stare, if you see what I mean. And you're not infallible, Jessica said. She braved the steady stare from the old eyes. Presently, the old woman muttered, "What's done is done." And we get Jessica vowing. So we get that little bit of silence there, and what's done is done. It's pragmatic. And as I said, I do like the point that these little back and forth between these two are very similar to the back and forth between Peter and the Baron. And I think it works differently. And we'll talk about tension in a wee minute here, I suppose. But the suggestion she doesn't like that. The Reverend Mother doesn't like it, but it's a truth, isn't it? Nobody's infallible. Facta says, "Be right back. Gotta make a call to my betters at Comcast." No worries, Facta. And the Bene Gesserit are often fallible, says Cha. Everyone's fallible in the Dune universe, I think. I often think, I suppose we're going to point some of this out tonight again, but there are things that are quite obviously, why would you do that? People talk about admiring Duke Leto, etc. I personally, as a person who can work with strategy, etc., and have some experience of these kind of things, I would not operate like Leto Atreides at all. And I think he's naive, stupid, and I think he's stupid as a character. For example, I wouldn't say that about the Baron. I think the Baron's quite clever. I think there's a lot of clever characters in Dune, but Leto Atreides is not one of them. I know you maybe disagree with me, but just generally from looking at him as a competent human being and looking at him as a father, I can relate to both of those things, and I would not behave like that, and I would not put my children in such danger, regardless of what it was for. I think, as I said, sometimes the one thing I always want you guys to remember is this, and I feel kind of bad when I do this to people. This book, really, what's it all about? As much as we say it's, heroes are dangerous, it's about ecology, it's about evolution, fundamentally it's about you. And how you take this stuff, I suppose, and what will you accept as acceptable if we want to invest in it that way. As I said, Paul is a character that should become deeply troubling to us in terms of our own personal ethics and morality, whatever they may be. So we get this bit that Jessica vowed never to regret her decision, though we all know, I suppose, if we haven't been through the book, but we know that this decision will kill billions and billions of people. Arguably, it's possibly the cause of the effect. And we get this fight, and we get real sarcasm again from the Reverend Mother. How noble. And you could read that in a couple of different ways, I suppose. That I don't know if about nobility and what does it really mean. And often it's one of those things that nobles aren't. If you know what I mean, nobles aren't noble. Royalty isn't royal. This kind of thing. And of course, we get a wee point here, just I wanted to make. Let's see. She says, how noble the Reverend Mother sneered. No regrets. We shall see when you're a fugitive with a price on your head and every man's hand turned against you to seek your life and the life of your son. And I was actually thinking when I was reading this, that's an oddly specific You know, you're going on the run, you're going to be hunted, there's a price on your head, blah, blah, blah. Quite a specific thing. We're about to sort of get into a few ideas of the Bene Gesserit here and so on, but is there no alternative? The interesting thing that I've made a wee asterisk here on the page, alternative. A Bene Gesserit should ask that. And it's almost said as if that's a wrong thing. And we're going, yeah, surely there are always alternatives. We get a few absolutes here from the Bene Gesserit, I suppose. Jessica vows never to regret her decision. No regrets, this kind of thing. And is there no alternative? It seems like a reasonable question, but we're told that a Bene Gesserit should ask that. Of course, you know, it's suggestive that of course there's not. And we get this little bit here where it says, Jessica says, I ask only what you see in the future with your superior abilities. And Mohiam says, I see in the future what I've seen in the past. You well know the pattern of our affairs, Jessica. Now, the wee note that I made is it seems that the Bene Gesserit, just based on a few things that they've said here, do deal in absolutes. You know, and what's the wee joke I like to make about absolutes? Death to everybody who generalizes. You know, it's one of those things. You know, it's a bit silly. But yeah, absolutes. If you deal with them logically, they're often fallible. You know, if someone says this is this, you know, I'm very, very good at finding an alternative. And if you can find an alternative when you're dealing with absolutes, it's done. It's as simple as that. You've proven it not so. So we've had a bit of a past present thing. We're going to talk a wee bit about that in a wee second whenever Paul arrives. But we have this past present going on, and what we're about to get here is a wee bit of Bene Gesserit philosophy. But what we get is that she discusses the pattern of our affairs, and we're told that the human race knows its own mortality, and that there's the fear stagnation. The fear is the stagnation of its heredity. And this is I'm just sort of paraphrasing here. Let me see. You well know the pattern of our affairs, Jessica. The race knows its own mortality and fears stagnation of its heredity. It's in the bloodstream. The urge to mingle genetic strains without plan. The Imperium, the Chome, company, all the great houses, they're all but bits of flotsam, pardon me, in the path of the flood. Pardon me. So, I think it's quite the urge to mingle genetic strains without plan. This is kind of almost offensive to Gaius, Helen, Mohiam. That's just kind of natural. That's how the world works, if you like. I suppose we do have selective breeding in a lot of things these days. But it's not a thing really that we'd argue that would seem wise for human beings, I think. Starting down the path of eugenics and this kind of thing. So we get a little bit about the Bene Gesserit, the Emperor, Chome, the great houses, all of them, nothing. Nothing in the flood of this. And well, I suppose in the path of the flood, well, what they're talking about is sexual reproduction here. And what I've written down actually is it raises lots of questions about the sexual desire and how does sex work in the Dune universe. And absolutely a thing worthy of study, as I was saying. And we get Chome here as well. And I've done a wee bit of scribbling here. So Chome is Combine Honnet Ober Advancer Mercantilis. We've got a combination of languages within that name. By the way, Chome. So there's English, there's French, and there's German in there. Cooperative, honesty over the advancement of merchandise, if you like, is what it means. So they're a corporation, and we find out a little bit about Chome here. A couple of wee things I thought interesting, actually. Let me just see. So they're a Universal Development Corporation, and they're controlled by the Emperor and the Great Houses. But what we're told is there are two silent partners here. One is the Guild, and the other one is the Bene Gesserit. I thought that was quite interesting. Brad, thank you again. There's no need to keep doing that, sir. I don't see the Baron as smart. Rat cunning is often closer to the mark. That he is, I suppose. I'll have to have a wee. We'll have a wee chat about intelligence and cunning at some other time. But thank you very much, sir, and take care of yourself. And yeah, I always get surprised when people, but very kind of you. I don't know what does that do. If I ping, I don't know. I have no idea how that works. But thank you very much, Brad. Okay, take it easy, sir. Have a good day. Just getting started in the day down there in Oz, aren't we? So there's something interesting about this, folks. That let me see. The bitterness. I've written down bitterness here. 25. Chom. It's to do with Jessica, isn't it? Sorry, just lost my wee train of thought. So we get a wee bit about this Chom. And it's just Mohiam sort of mentioning different powers in the universe, and that they're all nothing in comparison to this flood that's coming. And it brings out a bit, I think, real bitterness in Jessica. Chom, Jessica muttered. I suppose it's already decided how they'll redivide the spoils of Arrakis. And again, there's some foreknowledge here with Jessica and the Reverend Mother. There kind of is a sense of what's going on. But what we're told is really important here. Chom is but the weather vane of our times. And the Emperor and his friends command 59.65% of the Chom Directorate votes. So the one other thing we wanted to just mention here, I've scribbled it down here on the other page. Chom is OPEC. And there's no allegory involved with this. Frank Herbert's on record is saying it's not an allegory. Chom is OPEC. It's as simple as that. Well, the combination of oil-producing nations, etc., whatever that stands for. And so particularly at the time, I think, and we're looking at a lot of what's called hydraulic despotism at the minute. Certainly in the following on from the COVID pandemic, there's been a lot of squeeze being put on petrol, gas, heating, that kind of thing. People's heating bills are soaring very badly here, and it's becoming a pretty much a common thing. Funny enough, my dad's street was just dug up there recently, and they wanting to put down new gas pipes, but the price of gas has gone so high. I don't think they're able to sell it to anybody in the street. And why would you bother? So there we go. It's a weather vane of our times. Chom is a bit of a barometer, and we get a little bit about how Chom as a financial institution works within a financial institution, I suppose, and a corporation for the movement of goods. And so the Emperor and his friends really are the major shareholders, and it's all about really greed and profits, and they smell profits. And the more money they make, arguably, the stronger the Emperor becomes. And we're about to get a wee lesson here, and we're told that the pattern. We've had this mentioned again. This is the pattern, and it's the pattern of history, girl, is what the Reverend Mother says to her. And we get, this is the way Herbert kind of brings in some of his lessons. We kind of get this flippancy, if you like. That's certainly what I need right now, Jessica said. A review of history. And it's exactly what we're going to get. So once again, this is how Frank goes about his business. He's going to teach us, So it's a little bit sarcastic, but the pattern is history. Historia is to inquire into something from my point of view. The word history does not mean an event that has happened in the past. So therefore, all history is personal in a sense that it requires an individual or different people to look into it. And that's really what we mean by history. Things that happened in the past happened in the past. It's as simple as that. They happened. How we look at things, that's history. And so we can have historians have different interpretations of things, or simply not do their work very well, if you see what I mean. So we have this, again, this back and forth is leading us to a nice little, just what I need. This poking at each other, again, reminiscent of the Baron and Piter. Jessica giving a bit of sarcasm back. But this is what we get, the reader. course, Gaius Helen says, don't be facetious, you know as well as I do. But and I've made a wee note here. So Jessica knows Gaius Helen Mohiam rose, but we, the readers, do not know. And I just thought that's always worth pointing out. So this is one of the wee ways that we're getting a lesson on the Dune universe. And we get this 3-point civilization, and we're told that this is the way the universe works. It's based on the imperial household, the 3 points of this civilization. Imperial household, the federated great houses of the Landsraad, and in between them, the guild. And we find out that the guild has a monopoly on interstellar transport. Chaya says she leaves out the Bene Gesserit as the fourth force in the universe, playing politics wherever they can. Yes, another interesting idea that Frank wrote during before the first oil embargo. Of course, he was ahead of his time. And in particular, David, that's a very interesting point, both of you guys. First of all, we get the fact that the guild is the 3 points here. The guild and the Bene Gesserit are the two silent partners of Chom. I think it's interesting. It's those two. The guild is in between the imperial household and the federated great houses. We understand the guild's got a monopoly, so it's the only thing of its kind. And it makes you wonder, I suppose, the big question about the guild is, why did somebody else not start, another space shipping company and get in a bunch of people and feed them melange as well? Assuming that they just must have kept merging or, that kind of thing. But it's very surprising that there's only one, no matter where you fly in the universe, it's fly guild, that kind of thing, There's no second choice. Comment, I suppose, on monopolies. So, yeah, leave the Bene Gesserit as the fourth force in the universe, playing politics wherever they can. I always think it's interesting when people say playing at politics. But I think that the Bene Gesserit, see, that's the other thing about women in the universe as well. We should start to ask a lot of questions about this society. We've got very strong strong female characters here. Not strong in that sense, but very well written, very well realized characters. They're really interesting. Why aren't they a major power? And I think it's all to do with them being in the background. It's the sense of being a power behind the throne, and it's very deliberate. They're everywhere, the Bene Gesserit. You have to assume that every great house leader's got a Bene Gesserit wife, this kind of thing. And we can see how that can work against individuals, for example, whenever they choose to have children or not. So we get this little thing then. Again, he's setting up, we've got the 3-point civilization, and we've been told that, sarcastically, this is a history lesson. Then we get the lesson. The guild with its damnable monopoly on interstellar transport. And then we get this little chat about the tripod. In politics, the tripod is the most unstable of all structures. It'd be bad enough without the complication of a feudal trade culture, which turns its back on most science. So it's quite an interesting little set of words there. The tripod's the most unstable of all political structures. No, it's not. It's one of these things, again, if you apply a reasoned mind to this kind of thing. I think particularly with this choice, it's a comment on American politics, and I know that you've had sort of tripartite system there, which I'm not very up on. But you have the presidency, and I'm assuming is it the Senate, and then what would America have? Is it a House of Representatives? I'm not sure if maybe they're the same thing, but they're all each part of that tripod, if you like, is meant to be a check on the other. Any two of them can check the other, if I'm not mistaken. And you've actually got to see how badly that works with Donald Trump. I think I don't know too much about American politics, but please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, folks. I really am quite ignorant about it. But yeah, a little bit more of Frank's lessons about this universe, I suppose, and the feudal trade culture, which turns its back on most science. We'd have to argue that's probably most of the planets in the Dune universe, Oh, right, got you. Sorry, sorry, Chai. I was wondering who you meant by she. Got you. So the Reverend Mother leaves out the Bene Gesserit as the fourth force in the universe, playing politics whenever they can, and she told Paul the Bene Gesserit functions politics. That's correct. Chai is just saying it's the President, Congress. Congress is the Senate and the House of Representatives. Ah, right. Thank you very much, Chaya. And then the judiciary is the third. Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. Ah, very good. I actually thought the Senate and the House, but yeah, the judiciary, of course. Why wouldn't it be the third? Duh. I should have known that. Actually, no, I shouldn't. I really tried my best to stay away from politics. Or sorry, I don't think politics exists almost anywhere. All I see is government. And to me, politics, we talked a wee bit about it, the science of the happiness of humanity, really, is how I look at it. Aristotle's definition that says that politics is the science of the happiness of man, where the happiness of the individual is subservient to the happiness of the state or the collective. I've never agreed with that. Politics is that he should have just stopped one sentence in, I suppose. And you get the idea, I suppose, but I think the idea is, was it the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one, is how Star Trek would put that. But the idea that it also falls into that lesson, I suppose, that within what politics is, according to his definition, it's okay to crush an individual if it makes everybody else happy. And I'd argue how you treat our least individuals in society is a reflection on the collective, if you like. So we shouldn't crush people to make all of us a bit happier, Dune equals Paul. It takes. I like that, Chaya. Very, very good. It's one of these things, Chaya, and David. A lot of everyone else out there. Sorry, if you're going to have a serious chat about Dune, you're going to hit religion, politics. You're hitting all the ones they say in Ireland, by the way, is never talk about religion or politics. I like to tell people, if you come to Ireland, talk about them and see what happens. But because I do, and I get you get threatened and stuff like this. It's a disgusting thing here. Politics is a thing that people should be able to talk about. Religion has just got a bad one here, and it's all singing, all dancing, and it is absolutely evil. And I don't know how people attend to it. And it's not that it's the same Christianity that other people have around the world. It's just what they've done with it here, and the power and control of individuals. It's really, really bad, I think. But we don't want to run down it. But we will encounter topics like this. There's a lot of hard topics to discuss. I think I've sort of noticed this over a wee bit when I was doing the countdown to June. Some people wanted to chat about a few things. There's a worry about offending, causing offence, or being cancelled, or any of this sort of thing. And I've often said that I have no such problems with anything like that. I can take any question and have a reasonably intelligent conversation about it. And as long as we're measured and reasonably intelligent human beings, we can discuss things that are even uncomfortable to us. It's one of the reasons why I use the word interesting quite a lot. It's a good neutral word, if you see what I mean. And you can find horrible things interesting. Doesn't mean you like them, if you see what I mean. So again, unstable structures. Some of the things that Paul, that Herbert comes up with, and they all sound very good, though, don't they? They have a ring of real philosophical chops and this kind of thing, but they're not always the case. And I find it a wee bit sad pointing out stuff like this to people sometimes, especially when people have a really good bit of wisdom from the ancient world, and I go, oh, that's not that came from there, and you'll find a much older version about it there. It depends on how you read. To be honest, you'd have to in order to get this kind of stuff. It's usually way outside most people's viewpoints, most people's works, and it's outside the tenets generally of their own religions. I suppose so. Yeah, and I find it fascinating, and I'm interested in all religions. I don't probably agree with any of them, but I'm interested in deities and myths and how they exist and how they move and transform over the years, and how religions move with people. And migration is a fundamental of human existence. I think now that we've invented all these little red borders that we can draw on maps, it's become a bit of a problem. But they're natural movements to the human race, and they're fundamentally linked to climate, I have to say, or natural disaster in some cases, you know. But there we go. Now, what I thought interesting, what was interesting next, Jessica speaks up. She spoke bitterly, again, bitterness. Chips in the path of the flood, and his chip, this chip here, this is the Duke Leto, and this one's his son, and this one's probably her. And she's cut off by the Reverend Mother again, and just, oh, shut up, shut up, girl. The Reverend again. We have I suppose the authority figures in each of these chapters like telling people to be silent and to shut up. And I suppose what we get from her is full knowledge. You entered this with full knowledge of the delicate edge you walked. Sorry, I jumped ahead of myself a wee bit there. I just wanted to say that Jessica doing that was humanizing the issues for her. These aren't just chips in the path of a flood. It's her partner, the father of her son, and her son and herself and her friends and family. You know, it's personal. We're not just chips in the flood. That's where Mohiam shuts her down. And I've made a wee point here. I just thought, just in terms of my own view, I think Jessica's self-pity here is out of concern for Leto and Paul. Again, not for herself. But we're told that she has full knowledge of what she's done, and that that it's a delicate edge that she's walked. So we can't really consider anything to do with the whole Kwisatz Haderach breeding program having a male son for Leto. Jessica's absolutely aware of what the consequences will be, you know, and maybe it's even only 15 years later. It's that kind of payoff, you know. I think we're talking about the Gawain and the Green Knight, you know. Riddle games are the trading blows game, which are ancient games. I suppose the idea from the Gawain and the Green Knight is that Gawain is a bit of an idiot, to be honest, and not a very good man. Whenever if I give you you get to give a blow and I get to return the blow a year later, what he should have done was just given the guy a little nick. Of course, it's a game carried out at Christmas. So Gawain and the Green Knight's a Christmas story, by the way, folks. And the idea is then, of course, the year later, the Green Knight would return and just give him a nick. But because he chops his head off, it takes the game to a little bit of a different level and suggests that he's not a very virtuous man. David Segovia, Doc, Frank stated the similarity. OPEC, CHOAM in an interview, right? Yes, I'll tell you what, let's see if I'll bring up the PhD. I'll get you the quote. Well, wherever I find it, there we go. Let's just find OPEC in this. Bear with me a wee second. I'll just find it for you. I really should keep this open. There's lots of stuff in it. There we go. There we are. Let me just read it to you. So, CHOAM, the Combine Honnet Ober Advanced Mercantile, is the corporate entity that, together with the Spacing Guild, controls all trade in the Imperium, was in Frank Herbert's mind not just an allegory for OPEC. It's the organization of the petroleum exporting countries. I couldn't remember that earlier. He goes as far to say CHOAM is OPEC. Let me see. I'll just check the reference for you. Okay, right. That's from an interview. Let me see. Oh, Herbert F444. Sorry, it's from the homepage of the Herbert Limited Partnership online. I have a web page here that whether it's active. It's www.frankherbert.net/news/Genesis.html. That's there. It's where Herbert's talking about the Genesis of Dune. I've got a wee note here, by the way, folks. The influence of Herbert's Dune on ecology is still ongoing today. This is a good wee one. One such group influenced by Dune is the Arrakis organization, which is based in the Netherlands, whose aim is producing clean, potable water and clean energy for developing countries, together with helping to create sustainable incomes and education. There we go. I've actually got a wee note under this as well, because it says about Arrakis being from Mudraconis Alpha. And it just says that we've, for detailed look at the worlds and stars of the Dune universe, see Grazier KR 2008, The Real Stars of Dune in The Science of Dune. So there we go. Goodness, I haven't even looked at that. That's just to show you what that is, folks. I'll just get it for you. So a wee while back, my goodness, that one is this book here. There we go. Science of Dune. It's a collection of kind of just papers, really. Few PhDs, few masters. Oh, yeah. And they're quite short, and they cover all sorts of things. Some good, some not so good, I have to say. In fact, quite a lot, to be honest. I thought. But that's that wee book there, where and there's also Dune and Philosophy. I think I must have a wee look at that, actually. I kind of just flicked. Funny enough, I flicked through these and just kind of trying to find what I need in terms of using the indexes and stuff like that. But I probably quite enjoy the Dune and Philosophy one. The Science of Dune, not so much. I'm not too sure there's too many scientists working on that one. There you go. Okay, yes, nice quote. Yeah, so that's the Dune, the Genesis. There's a few different bits and pieces of that. And I have a few wee articles, actually, in old magazines by Frank. Really good interviews. I'll try and sort them out. Maybe whenever we get to the end of the book, actually, we'll maybe do a wee just addendum to the book club and have a look at some of those interviews and what Frank has to say. Because again, we're always sort of quoting selectively here and there, Let's see. So, where did we get to? The delicate. Yeah, Jessica's words here. Let me see, just where I'm at. 33. This little back and forward after the shut up. It gets a response from Jessica. Just to give it to you, it says, I am Bene Gesserit. I exist only to serve. Jessica quoted. And I've just made a wee sort of read that's ritual. I said Jessica's words here are a retreat to ritual and control, and it allows her to cover her emotions. I exist only to serve, and at which point, of course, Helen says, truth, with a big exclamation mark, doesn't it? Well, sorry, I've put the exclamation mark in. It's truth. And all we can hope for now is to prevent this from erupting into a general conflagration to salvage what we can of the key bloodlines. And we'll get to the next wee bit. It was quite interesting. So we get these terms, and generally a conflagration is against the fire, and that is contra is against. Flagrare is to blaze, isn't it? To blaze against in Latin. It's a big fire basically that wrecks everything, large amounts of property, land, this kind of thing. So we kind of have the terminology here, conflagration, kind of damage to property, land, etc. Salvage is the word that we have used quite a bit. We're going to salvage, and again, salvage what we can of the bloodlines for the breeding program. It's almost dehumanizing the people that are involved in the bloodline, I think. And I think the Bene Gesserit are very interesting in this chapter, both Jessica and the Reverend Mother, and they reveal quite a lot about what I suppose. The one thing that the more we go through Dune, I think the more amazing we think of the Bene Gesserit. Wow, and especially when we get to the final two books, the Bene Gesserit really are quite kick-ass, aren't they? I suppose, if there's a good term there. But we do, I suppose, the further on the books that I went, I tended to not think of them as more and more in control, that kind of thing. But they both have little hints at their weaknesses here, I think, and I'm not sure, but I actually think it's really just between the two of them. I don't think either of these two would show these weaknesses outside of this set of circumstances, if you think. Excuse me. So we have Jessica's tears press out. And you could argue is this a visible sign of weakness as we get to know the Bene Gesserit. You could also argue, if we get along a bit further, is she giving water to the dead, in a sense? Over the future death of Leto. And what we get a little bit of sense of here is somebody mentioned this a wee bit earlier. So just to come back to it, let me see, 35. Where are we? Jessica closed her eyes. Feeling tears press out beneath the lids, she fought down the inner trembling, the outer trembling, the uneven breathing, the ragged pulse, the sweating of the palms. Presently, she said, "I'll pay for my own mistake." So just within that little idea, we've already seen Paul exhibit control over his anxiety. Jessica doing a bit of it too. Control over the inner, the outer, breathing, pulse, sweat. Pardon me. It's all quite impressive, isn't it? And the next bit's particularly interesting, I think. I don't know what you guys think. I'll pay for my own mistake. And what does she mean by that? I suppose is it choosing to have a meal and chat? Is Paul a mistake? It's kind of suggestive what she's saying there, isn't it? Is Paul a mistake? Does she realize that what the mistake is even? How is she going to pay for it? I suppose. If we think about it in those rather than just accepting what we're told, what's this about really? And makes us ask questions, doesn't it? Of course, we're told your son will pay with you. And again, how? What's going to happen here? The conversation, the way it's presented is that that there is a looming threat, and it's because of the actions of Jessica having this boy. It's going to happen no matter what. And it's a mistake, I think it's really interesting. And the next bit is where we talk about shields, and I think this bit in particular works on a few different levels. Your son will pay with you, says Gaius Helen Mohiam. I'll shield him as well as I'm able, replies Jessica. Shield? The old woman snapped. You well know the weakness there. Shield your son too much, Jessica, and he'll not grow strong enough to fulfill any destiny. So we have the word shield mentioned 3 times there. Jessica talking about, I'm going to shield my son as well as I'm able. The old woman snaps at this term. And again, she's back to being an old woman. And we're told the weakness there. Shield your son too much, Jessica, he'll not grow strong. This is, again, a kind of our nature-nurture thing, isn't it? How do we mollycoddle our children, this kind of thing? Or do we understand, sometimes bad things happen, tough things happen, and that they're not always the worst thing for your development as a human being, But I think we talk about little clues within Dune, and I think this is a big one here. The shields, there's a clue here, and the fact is that we get this repetition, but there's a weakness. And shields, you well know the weakness there. Shield something too much, and you won't go strong enough. We're going to see that we know what's going to happen with the house shields, the reliance on shields, and obviously we've got a wee mention of destiny here as well, and it starts to make us ask questions, I suppose. Destiny, is there free will here? Is there determinism? What's going on? Because this guy, according to these people are sort of saying the future, blah blah blah. Leto's, can we do nothing? It's kind of almost suggestive that you've got no free will. Excuse me. Sorry. Sharp intake of air there. Rather unexpected. Apologies. Let me whistle a wee bit there. Throat's getting a wee bit raggedy, but we'll keep going, folks. So, again, we get a wee bit of a mention of Arrakis. And is it that bad? Is it really that bad? And of course, the Reverend Mother lets us know, yeah, it's pretty bad. Bad enough, yeah. Not everything about it's bad. And what we have here, let me just check this, just to run through this wee bit here, folks. Jessica turned away, looking out the window at the gathering darkness. Is it really that terrible? This planet of Arrakis. This word terrible keeps him arriving here. Terrible planet. Of course, we're going to link this up with Paul's terrible purpose that he's already discussed, and we're going to meet again here. David says, I think whoever birthed a Kwisatz Haderach will have a heavy burden for eternity. Who knows if the final result of the breeding program is easy to control or to be directed to fulfill hidden agendas? Yeah, I suppose, arguably, who knows? Heavy burden for all time. Yeah, absolutely. Who knows really the consequences of any of our births, if you see what I mean? Final result reading program is easy to control to be a direct or fulfill. Of course, we do know as we get along a wee bit, David, that the Kwisatz Haderach itself evolves, doesn't it? It changes. It's not always the same thing. There's more than one. But it's a good point. Yeah, it's I'll tell you what. I'll give you a good analogy, David. The one thing I've always wondered about is the plane that dropped the second nuclear bomb. And I don't mean the first nuclear bomb being the one at Trinity. So the Hiroshima bomb, isn't it? Is it the Enola Gay? I suppose is what I'm talking about. And the plane is named after one of the crewmen. One of the co-captains or something. His mother. And of course, there's a song Enola Gay. We associate that name with the bomb, the bomber that dropped the first big nuclear bomb on Japan, but it's some guy's mum, if you know what I mean. And I've often wondered about this. How did she feel about that? Hey mum, I named the plane after you and I just wiped out 80,000 people with one bomb. How'd you like it? Your name will forever go down in history as association with the death of about 70,000 people. Probably much more than that. And what on earth did Enola Gay think of that? Thanks, son. I'm so proud of you. It's a hard one to fathom. There's things that happen to people in life, and you just wow. It's why or why. But I think it's something similar. I thought not that it's a burden. The woman didn't do it, but to forever have her name associated with that thing, I think it's a terrible thing. It's interesting. Yeah, always interesting. And we're about to up the ante a wee bit here. What we're about to get is the old mission area protectiva. And we find out a little bit about this. Of course, we've got the stuff in the back of the book that we can jump to quickly. But what we're told is that in terms of Arrakis, that the mission area protectiva has been in there, been to Arrakis, softened it up somewhat. And interesting that Mohiam's voice softens at this moment as well. So if we check out a little bit about the mission area protectiva in the book, we're told that they're an arm of the Bene Gesserit order, that they sow infectious superstitions. I've put memes next to that, or even myth themes, on primitive worlds. Excuse me. And open regions to exploitation by the Bene Gesserit. It opens regions to exploitation by the Bene Gesserit, and then we're told to see the Panoplia Prophecticus. So, for those who don't know, just to run through a mission to protect, a protective mission. The mission area protectiva is the Bene Gesserit's version of the Roman interpretation. I'll call it the Roman interpretation because it's the version of it that's most famous, I suppose. Interpretatio Romana. And as we were talking a wee bit about it, it's pretty much the same thing. David says, "Yeah, great analogy, very accurate. Some decisions have a deep impact in the future. Yeah, and who's to say how long those that impact will have? Some of us, it's not that I just thought I often wondered about it. It's one of those things, there's things that you see and that happen in life that affect you and cause ripples down throughout time. I could give you another good example, I suppose, David, is that my two dogs have got there's a connection between Sachsenhausen, Oranienburg, Sachsenhausen death camp, and my two dogs, and it's to do with Untermensch prisoners there. I've visited this death camp, and it's to do with dogs, to be honest with you. And I suppose there was basically an individual. They're both disabled, and the death camps were open before World War II, and there was an individual who probably what you would call dwarfism, and another individual with gigantism, and the Nazis thought it would be great to put these two people together, dress them in each other's clothes, have them sleep in each other's cots, humiliate them, torment them, and put them in the dog and with the dogs and stuff, and set the dogs on them and so on. Absolutely horrible. And I've looked into these two individuals and can't find out. Don't know who they are. And there's quite a bit of stuff about various things at this place, but the idea of Untermensch, if you like, there's photographs and evidence, is not one of them that's presented. So you'd have to go there to see these people, these photos, and it's a bit to do with there's always to do with the dogs. And I often the thing is that there's pictures of these two men looking at each other and smiling at each other, and somehow they in the midst of all this horror, they find friendship. All these years later, my big dog sleeps in the little dog's bed. The little dog sleeps in the big dog's bed. This kind of thing. How we found the dogs, what happened to them. I don't know if it had some kind of little subconscious thing, but what I saw there is kind of why I have two dogs. And it's a strange thing to explain that somebody's cruelty to someone else has rippled down into another century and affected me. Interesting. But when we put some thought into things, it really does take us off to places. A panoply, for those who don't know, folks, this panoplia propheticus, it's what all sounds very Latin and mysterious. A panoply is a big collection of something. That's all. Panoply is the word. Excuse me. And prophecy, in terms of prophecy, can mean different things. In Greek, what it means is before the speaker, basically. Pro being before. A prophetes is a kind of a Greek spokesman. Prophetes speaker. So there you go. So the Panoplia Propheticus, this is the collection of myths and religious ideas that the Bene Gesserit, their book on mythology, if you like, that they go in and use to sow these seeds of I suppose ultimately fulfillment, and that's kind of what they do. A man will come, this kind of thing, and you could almost think of it as the way movie trailers used to go, a hero will rise, this coming next week, this kind of thing. So they go in and set up a set of stories, really impressed, do a bit of storytelling, and one day that person will come. And this is the setup for any Bene Gesserit who's ever bothered pretty much anywhere. I suppose they sow certain myths on most worlds, I think, but I think this particular one is and we'll find that out. I think there's whenever Jessica gets on to Arrakis, she finds out which particular myths the Bene Gesserit have sown there. And she goes, "Oh my God!" I'm paraphrasing now. I have to jump. We'll get there, but I think she's going, "Oh my God! They used that one here. This must be a really bad place." Something like that. I think So a little bit of back and forth between the two Bene Gesserits, and I think it's a great interaction between the two. and we're learning a lot more. We're picking up continually, and Herbert's been, oh, I don't need a history lesson. Here's a lesson. This kind of thing. He's at the same thing. How he teaches about us about his universe and his ideas, and as I said, grounds them in some form of reality that we understand. Pardon me. So, where are we? Sorry, I'm burping away here tonight. I have to have something to sort of wash my mouth out with, and I don't. Beer's not really a good one for doing these. It makes you just too burpy, doesn't it? I'll just stick with the juice. Saying that, I think my beer's gone flat. Excuse me. Not that I'm bothered. So, let me just check. 40. Where am I? Hang on. So yes, the old she wants Paul to come back in. Sorry, I just lost my place there a wee bit, folks. Call the boy in here. I must be leaving soon. And we get there's a few wee tells here, I think. Must you is the response from Jessica. Suggested that she doesn't want the old woman to leave. And of course we get the response from Mohiam. And it's quite nice. And I think this is payoff at the end of the chapter, real payoff. The old woman's voice softened. Jessica, girl, I wish I could stand in your place and take your sufferings, but each of us must make her own path. And it's interesting. And we're about to get a little bit more. So Gaius, Helen, Mohiam wishes that she could help, but she has to head off. And what she says next is kind of almost revealing in a way. I think it's a subtlety. And if we understand the story, we should get it a bit. You're as dear to me as any of my own daughters. But I can't let that interfere with duty. So there's two ways you can interpret that sentence, because we know that Jessica doesn't know who her parents are, but it's a strong suggestion that either A, she is, I love you as much as any of my daughters. If we could put the word other in there, then we would have an absolute confirmation that Jessica is Helen's daughter. It's not there. We can also interpret it the other way. I love you as if you were one of my daughters, because we've had a prior relationship, teacher and pupil, this kind of thing. But I do think it's a little subtlety, and it's a wee nod there, especially as we understand. If we move along, we understand the story, etc. Excuse me. And I've just put here, what is their relationship? Just as a wee note to myself, I think it's a nice wee moment, but it seems more that teacher, pupil, or servant and mistress, if you see what I mean. And I've just put down, is this a subtle admission? Is it a little clue? It could well be. But again, the Reverend Mother doesn't let these things interfere with duty. And Jessica understands the necessity of this. The interesting little point, that's her response. Do we understand the necessity of this at this point? And I think the answer is no, we don't. We know what they did, why they did it. They both know. Let me just find this wee bit here. What you did, Jessica, and why you did it, we both know. But kindness, I think this is really interesting. Kindness forces me to tell. Kindness forces me to tell you there's little chance your lad will be the Bene Gesserit totality. You mustn't let yourself hope too much. And I want to point out a couple of wee things here. First of all, kindness juxtaposed with force. Kindness forces me to tell you something. I think that's quite an interesting. But the Reverend Mother is kind here, and I thought that this was and how she's played in the David Lynch film is the same way. I think she's kind. It's very well played. How she's played in the new film, I think there's almost none of her personality there at all. The character is almost brought in like a weapon and used and then thrown out. And I got very little of. I think that's my big problem with a lot of almost everything to do with Denis Villeneuve's Dune, is the characterization's really bad. Apart from obviously all the very big the missing stuff. I actually went to put it on again the other week. Thought maybe I'd been a wee while. and I actually turned it off pretty quick. I just no, not for me, I'm afraid. Much prefer the David Lynch version, I have to say. Uh, uh. But we get odd way of putting it is that there's little chance that Paul will be the Bene Gesserit totality, and I think that's quite an interesting term there. The suggestion that he'll be the male and female Bene Gesserit, and then we get this other little use of the word hope out of the Bene Gesserit is quite interesting. I think we're told it previously that hope clouds observation, that we shouldn't hope too much. And we get this again, this reiteration here. What you did, Jessica. Oh, sorry, I just said that again. You mustn't let yourself hope too much. So there's little conflicting things about the Bene Gesserit here, and I think that particularly for these two characters, it really does help humanize them, especially later on. Yeah, I think again we're also got to consider this the juxtaposition of comparing these two to the Baron and Piter, if you see what I mean. And again, Jessica shook tears from the corner of her eyes. Where are we? And I think this is a really Jessica shook tears from the corner of her eyes. It was an angry gesture. You make me feel like a little girl again. Reciting my first lesson. And she forced the words out. And here we go. Here's Jessica Atreides' Jessica's first lesson. Humans must never submit to animals. A dry sob shook her in a low voice. She said, I've been so lonely. And of course, Mohiam thinks that this should be one of the tests for the Bene Gesserit. So this is, in fact, I've got a few wee notes here. Jessica's first lesson is, of course, humans must never submit to animals. And I've written cobblers next to that. As you'll find that I do. If I've taken something and tested it in this, I understand animals a wee bit. And these are absolutes. So I'm not a fan of absolutes. If you're dealing with any kind of philosophy, religion, anything like that, the worst thing for your thinking is an absolute. And the easiest thing to tear down is an absolute. They're very rare that they actually work, I think. And it could be just a matter, sometimes semantics, etc., this kind of thing. But the other saying goes, if you can't say what you mean, you can hardly mean what you say, I suppose. So humans must never submit to animals. This is the first lesson of the Bene Gesserit, and it's kind of linked into, I suppose, what we think about the again about the thinking machines. Again, about humans mustn't allow machines to be blah blah blah. It's all about the human mind having supremacy over everything, really, over animals, over machines, etc., etc. And I thought that the one wee comment that I've made is that the response that Gaius Mohiam says here is that humans are almost always lonely. And I've written down that's not an absolute for once. They're almost always. Not always, almost always, if you see what I mean. And I find some of the language here a wee bit funny. But I think generally you should put to the test what Frank says. He is a deceptive writer. And I think generally what's going on here is he's really allowing us to get a bit more, as I said, it's to humanize these two a bit following the events of chapter 1. So we're about to get Paul returning, and we get a wee bit of, again, understanding. And empathy. The Reverend Mother wants to see Paul. Summon the boy. He's had a long, frightening day. He's had time to think and remember, and I must ask him other questions about these dreams. So they are aware that it's been a pretty scary thing. Each one of them, I suppose, understands the level of fear, pain, and anger involved in the Gom Jabbar test. And particularly, I suppose, anger isn't a thing that we tend to associate too much with Jessica, this kind of thing. Excuse me. But we get Paul coming back into the room, and I love Paul at this part of the book. I think he's such he's really just sort of standing up on his own 2 feet. He's standing up for himself a fair bit here, and that's what I particularly like about his character. Paul returns to the room. with stubborn slowness. And again, stares. Another one is the staring that goes on quite a lot. Stares at the Reverend Mother as if she was a stranger. And a lot of the staring goes on. I think the silences in these chapters are quite good. He's pretty much wary, and he gives. The interesting thing is, I suppose, when he meets the Reverend Mother for the first time, he gives her this kind of bow, where his arm sweeps this just by the swishes of her skirt, if you like, and it's because he's unsure of her station, her rank, for example. And this time he's not. He gives her a wee nod, as if you would to an equal. And I suppose whenever previously I always thought that was a bit of the sort of flourish that his dancing teacher had done. I thought that was him being a bit cheeky, actually. And we referred to Paul now as young man when the Reverend Mother's talking to him, and we're going to discuss Paul's dreams here. And just before we get into his dream, his words are quite direct and quite blunt. "What do you want?" he asked. And he's quite short and quite curt with the Reverend Mother, not giving away too much, but he's honest enough with her, I think. And what we get to find out a little bit is a little bit about Paul's dreams. And yeah, we get one of Herbert's poems. And we're going to go to Arrakis and have a look at the future here. Yeah, guys, and I'm chatting away, so if anybody does have any comments or anything, or wee questions, fire away. So, Paul's dreams. Here's what we find out about Paul's dreams. One, he doesn't dream every night, but not all of his dreams are worth remembering, but he can remember them all. He says some are worth remembering and some are not. But he knows the difference somehow in what should I bother to remember, what I shouldn't. Pardon me, I suppose which ones have got worth to him. And within this we get tells the Reverend Mother, we focus on one particular dream. Have you had a dream the last night? And it's quite interesting because the Reverend Mother, how do we put this? I suppose it's kind of almost we're going to the future from this moment and talking about this moment in the past from the future. So yeah, it's a very interesting, odd little thing. So Paul tells her, "I dreamed a cavern and water and a girl there, very skinny and big eyes. Her eyes all blue, no whites in them. I talked to her and tell her about you, about seeing the Reverend Mother on Caladan." Paul opened his eyes. "And the thing you tell this strange girl about seeing me, did it happen today?" Paul thought about this then. "Yes, I tell the girl you came and put a stamp of strangeness on me." "Stamp of strangeness," the old woman breathed, and again she shot a glance at Jessica. There's lots of glances going back and forth between these two here. So we get the focus on a specific dream from the previous night. And it seems almost, if you think we're in a castle and we've shifted to a cavern. There's water here. The girl, skinny, big eyes, all blue, no whites. So we haven't quite got that blue within blue within blue. In relation to this, and of course we know that this is Chani that they're discussing, or Paul's dream is about Chani. So Paul talks to her about the Reverend Mother and seeing her on Caladan is this moment now. What I thought was interesting was Gaius Helen Mohiam asked him, "Is that this thing, did it occur today?" And we go into that stamp of strangeness. If you think about how we've been sitting within the characters, at the start there we had Jessica staring into the past in this chapter. We've had the three of them all contained within the present, and now we have this future where we're heading to the future to this girl Chani. So we have past, present, and future, and it's kind of interesting, actually, almost the setup of it. When we're talking about that, the goddess, the mother goddess of the Dune universe, and how she's feminine, male, neuter, and the three aspects. And I thought it was kind of interesting how the two the two women on either aspect of this, if you think of it as a timeline, and then Paul with the Reverend Mother and Jessica in the present. So just little patterns of things like that. Whether they have any real meaning, who knows? But I just thought it was a wee interesting way of looking at it. I've just sort of drawn a wee diagram in past, present, future, and what's going on there. And we have this stamp of strangeness that's been put on Paul. The phrase is repeated by Mohiam. And again, we get this little, so we're talking about these little glances that go back and forward between, these silences that go back and forward between the Reverend Mother and Jessica. And essentially what we're getting here is an interrogation of Paul, really. It's a nice interrogation and his dreams. And we're asked if he's asked if his dreams come true often. And the answer is yes, his dreams do come true. So again, we're getting a real sense of the unusual about Paul. His dreams come true. And as I said, he's whole, there's a sense of, we're getting a sense of prophecy, the future, all sorts. And at this point, you could almost argue this is reading like a bit of like a sword and sorcery novel. It has a feel of fantasy to it, if you like. But the technical details are starting to fill out, and the world is being fleshed out for us. Paul's dreamed. We find out Paul's dreamed of this girl before, and Reverend Mother asks him, "Do you know her?" And the tense shifts here. He goes, "I will know her." And again, that's quite interesting. I'll have to get another synonym for interesting. I'm sure there's plenty of them that I know, but it's my go-to safe word, I think. So who is this girl, I suppose, is what we want to know, maybe. And it's also kind of what the Reverend Mother wanting to know. So as I said, we're talking about Chani here, and we get a bit of detail. And again, it's going to let us into a little bit about the world that Paul's going to go to. They're in a little place with rocks, and it's sheltered. It's night. It's hot. There are patches of sand that can be seen through an opening in the rocks. They're on Arrakis, essentially. We're looking at Arrakis. And that they're waiting for Paul to meet some people. She is frightened. She's trying to hide it from him, and he is excited. And at this point, we get the famous little, "Tell me about the waters of your homeworld, Usul." And I think what's quite a wee bit of fun, this, it allows, Herbert plays with us a wee bit, and allows us to sort of see Paul do a wee bit of thinking, get something wrong, rethink it, and then get it right. And Paul thinks this is strange, because tell me about the waters of your homeworld, Caladan. Surely is what it should be. It's what he's thinking. So he thinks Usul is a planet at this point, and he's never heard of it. And why would he be from Usul when he's clearly from Caladan? And so it is him misinterpreting this vision. Usul, from the Fremen language, if we hit the terminology of the Imperium, is the base of the pillar. And yeah, so we move. There's more to the dreams. And before he goes on, he changes his view here. I suppose, again, we get a little bit of his inner workings. Is there more to this dream? Jessica promised. Yes, but maybe she was calling me Usul, Paul said. I just thought about that. Again, he closed his eyes. She asked me to tell her about the waters, and I take her hand. And I say, I'll tell her a poem, and I tell her the poem that I have to explain some of the words like beach and surf and seaweed and seagulls. So we have a lot of references, I suppose, to water and words associated with water, seas, rivers, etc. The fascination about water. And Paul basically says, well, I'm going to tell her this poem. So the words, first of all, one of the things that we should be interested in here about, I suppose, is words like beach, surf, seaweed, seagulls. She doesn't understand them. Suggests that they're outside of her experience. They're outside of her vocabulary, or else just within how Chani's been raised, I suppose. Maybe it's just sheltered from language. I often think that you would have stories about things like this through the Reverend Mother's the Sayadinas, etc., their other memory, that they can recall things on other planets back in the past. So we're told that the Reverend Mother wants to know what's the details, what poem is it? And we don't get a title for the poem, I think, but we're told that it's one of Gurney Halleck's tone poems. It's a sad poem. So we have an interesting name, Gurney Halleck. We'll have a look at him a wee bit in the next chapter, but it's an introduction of another character that we haven't met yet, like Alia. And of course, it's not Paul that recites the poems. It's a suggestion that Jessica really does know her son quite well. And she obviously also knows Gurney's poems because it's her that recites this poem. It's an awful poem, by the way, I think. And I'd argue it's not a poem, but well, it's an attempt at a poem. But there's no meter or rhyme to this piece of work. It's just a bit of work. And I suppose the whole point of it is to impress upon the reader. It's a certain type of thing. But I remember salt smoke from a beach fire and shadows under the pines, solid, clean, fixed. Seagulls perched at the tip of land, white upon green, and a wind comes through the pines to sway the shadows. The seagulls spread their wings, lift, and fill the skies with screeches. And I hear the wind blowing across our beach and the surf, and I see that our fire has scorched the seaweed. So there's a bit of Frank Herbert's poetry there. I just put no meter, no rhyme. I didn't really comment, but I quite like my poetry, I have to say. Not the best, but maybe it's one of Gurney Halleck's. We'll just say it's maybe one of Gurney's, isn't it? The whole point of the poem, I suppose, is it's about evoking memory, remembering the smoke from a beach fire, the pine trees, this kind of sea scene, if you like, and a certain atmosphere to it. It's sad because it's a nature poem, I think. Well, trying to create some interpretation out of it. There's a regret in it, in the way that the fire, the beach fire, has burned some of the seaweed, and so we have the sadness comes from damaging nature whilst enjoying nature. I've put a wee note, by the way, folks. I don't know if any of you have heard of this. I remember a friend of mine actually asked me about this once in London, and he says, "Could you bring me a bag of dulce?" And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. What's dulce?" And he says, "Oh, you eat seaweed in Northern Ireland, don't you?" And I went, "Oh, dulse. You eat dulse." So just reminded me on dulse, which is a thing you get over here. Just seaweed you eat and chew. It's lovely. Very salty. So yeah, this is supposed to show again, and we're looking at a future event here. And of course, Paul goes, "That's the one. That's the poem." And of course, we get a bit more staring, and then a little bit more from the Reverend Gaius Helen Mohiam. And again, we're getting a little bit more information from her, do with the Kwisatz Haderach. So she says, "As a proctor of the Bene Gesserit, I seek the Kwisatz Haderach, the male who can truly become one of us." And we're told that Jessica sees the possibility of this, but with a mother's eyes, whereas Mohiam sees the possibility of this, but nothing more. And so there is a from that we should conclude that there is a possibility that Paul is this Kwisatz Haderach, this Bene Gesserit totality, And of course, another wee bit, I should really stick to my notes here, actually. They keep me going here. So she falls silent here. And the implication, Paul knows, not implied at all, sorry, Paul knows she wants him to speak. And because of that, he doesn't. He keeps his mouth shut. And again, he's just being probably still quite angry, quite rebellious. And it shows, as the Reverend Mother points out, that Paul has depths to him. Now, unfortunately, I think there's a wee bit here with Jessica. Paul's basically, he's being a bit petulant, he's being a bit dismissive. Why wouldn't he be in these situations? "Can I go now?" is basically what he's saying. And Jessica pipes in with, "Don't you want to know about the Kwisatz Haderach?" And the interesting kind of thing is it's almost like a mother speaking to their teenage son. Doesn't really want to know, doesn't it? Seems almost as if he doesn't care. Um, and why is that? Because she said those who tried for it died. So what the heck, you know? And yeah, so I think it's almost his response is that he's at this point he almost has no interest in it because a bunch of people are dead. Why should I do that? You know? And we get this strange little bit coming out of the Reverend Mother here, where it's oh, hang on, missed a wee bit here. Oh no, there we go, 62. So the Reverend Mother says, "But I can help you with a few hints at why they failed." The Reverend Mother said, and Paul's response is pretty bang on. I think it's quite interesting. She talks of hints. Paul thought she doesn't really know anything, and he said, "Hint then." And of course, the response is, "And be damned to me, eh?" You know, yeah, Paul's concluding that she doesn't really know that much. And go ahead, hint to me. So then she tells him, of course, here we go, another one of these Bene Gesserit axioms. Where are we? That which submits rules. That's it. 62, where are we? Now, of course, Jessica's first lesson, this is a contradiction, isn't it? Jessica's first lesson is a human should never submit to animals. But here we have the Reverend Mother contradicting that lesson. I think I'd written cobblers or something next to it, as I was telling you earlier. Excuse me. That which submits rules is a direct contradiction of Jessica's first lesson. A human should never submit to an animal. And I think it's very, very important. Paul's stunned by this, by the way. This really, it's almost that kind of, and he thinks she's talking about tension within meaning. And this is quite an important thing. I think somebody mentioned it earlier there. He thinks this is a really simple, this is like an elementary lesson. It's a very basic lesson. What are you telling me this for? You know, that kind of thing. And she extends the metaphor, really. Let's see. And she says, the willow submits to the wind and prospers until one day it is many willows, a wall against the wind. And then she says, this is the willow's purpose, which I've written. No, it's not. But anyway, just again, you know, trying not to take things too seriously, but whenever we find something that's not true or an absolute, we tend to like to point it out. So we get this word purpose here again, and it reinfects Paul with his terrible purpose. And I just wanted to say the word infect, Paul's being infected with his terrible purpose. Whenever we were talking about the Missionaria Protectiva, if we check it out, its job is to sow infectious superstition. And there we go. Paul's infected with his terrible purpose. The reuse of language here, it's a reinforcing of these ideas, even when they're done with different characters. I think it's really well done here. And of course, this brings it, the fact that this terrible purpose, whatever this means, and that Arrakis is this terrible place, it makes, again, Paul's anger comes out at the Reverend Mother here. And, you know, it's almost a pity he doesn't say some of these things to her face, I suppose. Where are we? 60, terrible purpose. Oh, 65, I'm ahead. Paul stared at her. She said purpose, and he felt the word buffet him, reinfecting him with terrible purpose. He experienced a sudden anger at her, fatuous old witch with her mouth full of platitudes. And then, of course, he says, this is where we have this wee break where we get to see a bit of Paul's character, actually, I think. Everybody's that busy talking about you're going to be a super being, this kind of thing, Neil Bene Gesserit, Kwisatz Haderach. Paul's focus here is still on his father. You talk as if my father's dead. He isn't. You know, and the anger, what's going on here? But we're not allowed to forget about Leto, and Paul certainly doesn't want him forgotten. And as I said, we've heard all this stuff about Leto, and we don't really have much of a clue about him. We haven't seen him. People just talk about him a lot. This Duke Leto. And I think another little interesting bit about the Reverend Mother's character comes out here. And forgot to write the number down in my book. There we go, 67. And it's a bit like if she could take Jessica's place, she would. There's more to this woman, and there's more to the Bene Gesserit, and there's more to how they look at Leto the First, I think. And here it is. If there were a thing to be done for him, we'd have done it. And I think that's really interesting. They would have done it. What does that mean? They would have attempted to save Leto, no matter if there was a way, they'd have done it. And again, I suppose it suggests that there's an absolute, that there's no way they can save him. And this is the thing that's kind of impressed upon Paul, I suppose. They might salvage Paul. There's that word salvage again, but for your father, nothing. And I've just made a wee note that this has kind of got me thinking about the Oedipus myth again. Of course, Paul's heavily based on Oedipus, and particularly, really, maybe even a little bit Leto. It's the sense of doom over Leto, the sense of that nothing can be done, and that he's a good man. And as much as this is an aspect of Oedipus as well, the everything that happens to Oedipus is pretty much a good guy. It's all about destiny and fate, and not even the gods can turn that aside, if you see what I mean. And we get that same feeling if we're a wee bit aware of that. I get the same feeling with Leto, that you get the sense that he's meant to be an admirable man, nice guy, etc., etc. It's just that he's doomed, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. And that's fate. That's, and as I said, it does bring up questions about free will, this kind of thing. But for your father, nothing. And we get this when you've learned to accept that, then you've learned a real Bene Gesserit lesson. And it's almost as if, are we not being taught Bene Gesserit lessons already? Or maybe there's something else disguised? It's kind of interesting the way the words are played with here. There's lots of subtlety. Particularly if we do look at the language, I think it's quite intriguing, So the other thing is that Jessica is also completely shook by these words. Excuse me. And again, what makes you so sure? Let me just find this wee bit. Right, 60. There we are. Paul saw how the words shook his mother. He glared at the old woman. How could she say such a thing about his father? What made her so sure? His mind seethed with resentment. Excuse me. Starting the throat's going a wee bit, folks. We're nearly done anyway. So the Reverend Mother looked at Jessica. You've been training him in the way. I've seen the signs of it. I've done the same in your shoes. The devil take the rules. So I made a wee note there. There's the devil turning up. That's another character from another religion, Let's see. So just wrapping up then, really, we're told a few things about, and we learn a little bit more about the Bene Gesserit. Jessica's been training him in the way, the Tao, if you like. And the Reverend Mother sees this, says that, sees this and says that she would be doing the same thing despite the rules as to be part of the devil. So the way, what is the way? And if we look it up at the back of the book, the way of the Bene Gesserit is, of course, the use of minutiae of observation. And another skill of the Bene Gesserit, he's being trained in this. And then we're told a little bit more. Ignore the regular order of training. He needs the voice. And we're told that Paul's got a good start in it. And it's needed for his safety. And that he needs more desperately. All of this coming out just in this little section here. And it really makes us feel a real sense of danger for Paul. and a bit of what are these things, the way, the voice. We know a little bit about the voice, and we're just told about the way a wee bit, but there's much more to it. Excuse me. And of course, we get the goodbye of the Reverend Mother, and goodbye, young human. Again, there's that phrase, and very interesting what she says and how she leaves here. I hope you make it. If not, we shall yet succeed. And again, we get another one of these looks between her and Jessica of understanding passing between them, etc. And again, she piles out of this room. If you remember how Jessica left the room in the first chapter, solidly, do you remember? Straight, boom, out she goes. Again, the Reverend Mother swept from the room, and her robes are hissing. I think it's quite an interesting little descriptor there. There's no backward glance, and we're told that the room, Jessica and Paul are shut from her thoughts. Now, the last wee bit, I think that's just interesting, is that we're told that Jessica caught a glimpse of Gaius Helen Mohiam's face as she is leaving, and there are tears on the seamed cheeks, sorry, and that Gaius Helen Mohiam has been crying, and I think this is well been. I think it's obviously well covered, if you like, and that the tears. We're told at the very end here that these tears are more unnerving than anything, any word or sign that's passed between them that day. And so we kind of have these two Bene Gesserits who've been crying a little bit, I suppose. And if we think about that, but by the time we get back to the end of the book, we think back about little things like this, about moisture, how, what does crying mean, this kind of thing. And the fact that these two women are so incredibly in control of their bodies and their emotions, you have to wonder. I actually think, that it is they're moments of weakness, if you like, but in each other's company. And I think it's only because of the trust that they have, that there is some much deeper relationship between Jessica and Helen Mohiam. So there we go, folks. That's us through chapter 3. And essentially it's a chapter, starts off with a little epigraph featuring, very briefly, Alia. Gives us a bunch of information on the Bene Gesserit, really, here. Excuse me. And it is very much we get a little bit of Paul, but I'd call this a Bene Gesserit chapter, and we learn quite a lot. And as I said, it gives us, I think, the real risk to Jessica's character in the first chapter is that she'd be dehumanized, seen as a bit of a monster, because of what's going on. And I think that this chapter does much to kind of readjust the balance of the mother here. And again, if we're thinking about archetypes and all of this kind of stuff, we have the crone, the mother. Paul's meant to be the maiden, if you see what I mean, and a little bit of a messing around with that. And again, as I said, we've had lots of action, staring, and the poking and prodding, the having a go at each other, little subtle goes, very reminiscent of what the Baron and Peter are up to in the previous chapter. Goodness gracious. Hi-ho. Goodness, I've given myself some work to do, haven't I? I've already started chapter 4. But we'll keep that for Thursday. But yeah, taking a good wee bit of work to get all this stuff done, folks. I hope you are enjoying it. And we've moved through that chapter. If you do have any wee questions or comments for me, fire away. And we'll be wrapping up. I'll wrap up in about 10 minutes, hopefully, actually, I think. Right, but this will be the shortest one yet. We're coming up to 3 hours, aren't we? Goodness gracious. Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? Let me see if we've got any wee comments that have. I think you've been listening to me pretty solid for a while. I think whoever bursts a quiz at Saturday will have a heavy burden for eternity. Oh yeah, we did run over that. Who knows if the final result of the breeding program is easy to control or to be director to fulfill hidden agendas? I often, the whole thing. Let me get this bit for you, actually. Oh, I'll tell you what, guys. One more wee thing for you before we head off. I'll read something to you in a wee minute. That I was chatting to anybody who was in for the Science Fiction Friday the other day about Tiger. There we go. And very pleased to say my copy of The Demolished Man has arrived. It's not sitting there, is it? No. Which I can't. So I've just finished Alfred Bester's Tiger Tiger. I'm going to read you something to do with Dune from Tiger Tiger in a wee second. What was I thinking on there? Oh yeah, Appendices of Dune. Religion of Dune. I think I've read this before, but when it comes to the breeding program, it's not. There's a strong suggestion that the breeding program is not theirs. Bene Gesserit motives and purposes, is that the one? Yeah. In the face of these facts, this is page in this paperback here. Trade paperback should be page 553, but it's just the very last page of Appendix 3, the very last paragraph. In the face of these facts, one has led to the inescapable conclusion that the inefficient Bene Gesserit behavior in this affair was a product of an even higher plan, of which they were completely unaware, and that has an exclamation mark at the end of it. That's the most intriguing line in all of the Dune books, I think. Really, really important. Is everything that we go through all the way, and unless it's something that Frank wrote at the very start that he hadn't planned to pay off many years later. Excuse me. Could be just a kind of a bit of a red herring. Who knows? But it's quite an interesting thing. The thing I was going to mention to you is I was having a wee chat about this book and how influential I think it is. Essentially that Gully Foyle is an prototype maybe for the Kwisatz Haderach. He's a very similar character. It's messianic science fiction, arguably. And the only difference, I suppose, is that if Gully Foyle was a Kwisatz Haderach, he'd be an extremely aggressive, borderline psychopathic, murderous Kwisatz Haderach, possibly the animal for which the Bene Gesserit are testing. But it was just to read you a wee bit from this book, which is published in 1956. Excuse me. It's to do with Arrakis. So this is a section. This is literally from the last couple of pages of The Star Is My Destination by Alfred Bester, which is also known as Tiger Tiger. And I'll just read this to you and see what you think. It might be just a loose association. It's to do with the character sort of being all these different places in the universe. Interestingly enough. And it says, and again he turned now into now. Canopus, yellow as the sun, gigantic, thunderous in the silent wastes of space, at last invaded by a creature that once was Gild. The creature hung gulping on the beach of the universe, nearer death than life, nearer the future than the past, 10 leagues beyond the wide world's end. It wondered at the masses of dust, meteors, and motes that girdled Canopus in a broad, flat ring like the rings of Saturn, and of the breadth of Saturn's orbit. That's an interesting one. Excuse me. We were having a wee chat about Canopus the other day. Is Arrakis, isn't it? And I just thought that was just having finished that book and what a great fun book it was. We're going to be working on my episode of it this week, and then getting back to the book club on Thursday with chapter 4. And for those of you who are reading it, I suppose that'll be the chapter that begins, you have read that Muad'Dib had no playmates his own age. And this is where we're going to, it's a great chapter. Again, we're going to meet all the tutors, if you like. And we had our heads in the ancient world a wee bit today, I suppose. And I think it's always interesting in terms of how Paul Atreides as a hero is constructed. Some of our heroes in the ancient world are pretty famous, and they have very famous tutors. So if we talked about Achilles being given command of the Greek fleet at 15, same age as Paul. Achilles has a tutor, and his name is Phoenix. Excuse me. And of course, we have Alexander the Great's personal tutor was Aristotle. So as much as I work as a private tutor myself, a personal tutor, it's one of the questions that I like answering whenever people ask me what good's a tutor. and I always tell them, go ask Alexander the Great. But there we go. So it's a wonderful little chapter that we've just had a look at, and it's a great interaction between Helen, Mohiam, and Jessica. We get a few name drops, and we learn an awful lot. And again, we're getting thrown these little lessons. But within this chapter, we've got a little bit more detail about Chom, a little bit about the Kwisatz Haderach, the history lesson that we get about how the society of the Dune universe is tripartite in its power structures. And we always get a little bit of Frank's philosophy. And goodness, in terms of mythology, we've had a few different things there. We've got the virgin goddesses. We've had a wee chat about Taoism. And of course, Caladan, Pavo, Peacock, Argos, Panoptes, and etc. etc. There's always something here. There's looking into the future. Yeah, and possibly a little bit of foreshadowing some things. And as I said, in others we get absolute foreknowledge, But there we go, folks. Listen, I'm gonna wrap it up again because this is getting heavy on my old throat, and it's enormous fun. I hope you're all some of you are still there anyway. But it's been a while, and I'm sure there's a few of you maybe headed off to bed or headed off to work. So thank you very much for joining me, and we'll go on with this in chapter 4 on this is Sunday, isn't it? Yeah, so we'll go on with this on Thursday at 9 o'clock as usual, and hopefully I'm going to try and push ahead and get a wee bit of it done this week so I can get a bit more on me Tiger video. Hopefully we'll see that within the next week or so. So in the meantime, folks, I'd just like to thank you very much for joining me on this wee Dune Book Club, working our way slowly through these books in incredible detail. And thank you all very much for your participation and your comments. Actually, we went all over the place today. And as I said, it's a thing that we'll do with Dune. It can take us to many topics, and there's never any bother with dealing with any of them, I think. But I hope you have enjoyed it for the true Dune fan. You'd have to be a bit fanatical, I think, to take it to this level. But I'm hoping you are enjoying it. And I always take a long time to say goodbye. So what I'll do is I'll say, I hope you're all keeping very well wherever you are. Look after yourselves, and I will say goodnight and see you on Thursday at 9, hopefully, for our next episode of the book club. Thank you very much for joining me, and all the best. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.